Make sure you keep it right here on the Fox News Channel today, because at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, the president will hold a press conference on the midterm elections. What will he say?
And we have a 3-hour after the show coming up right now.
And it starts in 2 seconds. 9 o'clock East Coast time on this Wednesday morning in America. There are 3 headlines. Republicans take back the House. They post significant gains in the Senate, and they take important governor seats in all corners of the country. We're now waiting for a news conference from the Speaker-designate, John Boehner. For him and his party, it was a night of history. Morning, everybody. On the morning after, we'll sleep when we're dead, they say.
Exactly. There's plenty of time for that.
That's right. I'm Bill Hemmer. Good to have you here. Nice to see you, Martha.
Good to see you again. Haven't seen you in a long time,
Right.
Bill. At least a couple of hours. Good to be here, everybody. I'm Martha McCallum. Great having you with us on this very big morning. We still have several races up in the air, folks, that are undecided at this hour. We're waiting for results in those. Let's take a look, though, at how the balance in the power in the House and the Senate shakes out right now. 46 seats went to the Republicans in the Senate. We are awaiting results in Washington, Colorado, and, of course, Alaska, which we're going to talk about in just a moment.
Also in the House, 239 seats going to Republicans, well above the 218 needed for a majority. And better than the Republican Revolution of 1994. All of that last night, getting the best of John Boehner caught up in the moment.
I spent my whole life chasing the American dream. Listen, I think a lot of you know I started out mopping floors, waiting tables, and tending bar at my dad's tavern. I put myself through school, working every rotten job there was, and in every night shift I could find. And I poured my heart and soul into running a small business. And when I saw how out of touch Washington had become with the core values of this great nation, I put my name forward and ran for office. So I'm going to thank my wife, Debbie, my girls, Lindsay and Tricia, my 11 brothers and sisters, and all my friends and neighbors in Ohio for giving me the chance to serve and the opportunity to stand before you ready to lead. Thank all of you. God bless you, and God bless our great country.
That from last night, now from this morning. Chris Wallace, anchor of Fox News Sunday. Good morning to you. Boehner will tell you that he cries when the wind blows, by the way.
I was going to say, I have spent time with him. That is the true, essential John Boehner.
Yeah, and many times when he gets up to give a speech, he says, I hope I can hold this one together. And last night, well, I guess you could give him marginal points for holding that together. 3 moments I want to talk about. Go back to the weekend of March 20th, 7.5 months ago. This is March 20th, 2010. This is Nancy Pelosi, leaders of the House, carrying a gavel into the House chamber. This was the weekend they passed health care. How does this picture look this morning to you, Chris?
Well, look, it's still historic, and I think anybody who thinks that when the president holds his news conference this afternoon, he's going to talk about compromising on health care, forget it. That is the signature accomplishment of this administration. It's something that Democrats have been trying to accomplish for half a century. They may go off on the margins and say, all right, let's include tort reform, but the basic idea of insuring 33 million people, and Republicans, that's going to be the pitch battle, because an awful lot of Republicans were elected to repeal and replace. They're going to fight that tooth and nail. I think there could be compromises in some areas, not on health care.
You do. That's the next question here. Apparently, John Boehner, Mitch McConnell both had conversations with Barack Obama last night. Has he shown the desire or the willingness to compromise yet?
No, but I mean, well, I mean, he's always talked the game. He hasn't really done it, and I think the key narrative of the last 2 years has been that when it came to the stimulus, when it came to health care, when it came to financial reform, yes, they tried to engage Republicans, and you can argue there are two sides to this story, but in the end, they had the votes and they rammed these things through. If he doesn't learn a lesson from last night, he's a lot slower than I think he is. I mean, the American people spoke, and they spoke with great clarity, and also just politically, whether he means it or not, he's got to find areas, as do Republicans, where they can do some business and get things done. This was no great mandate for Republicans last night either.
They put the lid on the White House. Any reaction, I think, stopped about 9 o'clock Eastern time and said nothing more from us tonight. You will hear from him today at 1 o'clock this afternoon. Now the governor's races. And there's a reason why they are so critical the way they went last night. Pennsylvania flips. Ohio flips. In fact, here's John Kasich from late last night in the Buckeye State after he declared victory.
Folks, we took a step forward tonight to putting Ohioans back to work. We took a step forward to shrinking government and making it work better. We took a step forward to making Ohio the best place to live and work in the country.
It was a very close race, and many will tell you it's hard to knock off an incumbent governor holding office. Ohio, Pennsylvania, New Mexico, Wisconsin, Michigan, South Carolina, all now Republican governors in each of those states. Why is it so critical when you look toward 2012?
Well, I was going to say two reasons. First of all, to 2011, redistricting. We remember that census where we all had to fill in those forms. Now the state legislatures in all of those states, every state, is going to redistrict.
the voters of America, the voters of Wisconsin, sent a very strong message to the folks in Washington. Say we do want to get our fiscal house in order.
You know, what's the message for the Tea Party here? You know, Sharon Angle did not make it. Christine O'Donnell did not make it. You did. Rand Paul did. What does this tell us about who the Tea Party is and where it's going?
Well, the Tea Party isn't just one group. So certainly from my standpoint, I kind of sprung out of the Tea Party, but, you know, I ran as a Republican because we have a two-party system here. And, you know, the only thing a third party does is you like folks like Al Franken. So I think you've got to join that two-party system, and the goal here is to hold the Republican Party more to their conservative roots. That's certainly what I intend to do.
All right. Senator-elect Ron Johnson, thank you very much for being with us, sir. Congratulations. We'll be talking to you.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for being here.
You mentioned Rand Paul. He wins in Kentucky. You will hear from him live next hour as our coverage continues in a moment.
I have a message. A message from the people of Kentucky. A message that is loud and clear and does not mince words. We've come to
Well, Republicans take the House and lots of governors' mansions as well. They've got a new agenda for that building that you see right there. Meanwhile, the Democrats are promising to continue pushing their policies. They maintain control of the Senate, and there's still some contests out there that are too close to call. Good morning, everybody. The day after the big night, a brand new hour of America's Newsroom. So glad you're with us this morning. I'm Martha McCallum.
And I'm Bill Hemmer. You know, we wait for these elections, and there are surprises. Certainly we had a few last night,
sure
and now we try and chart the course.
A couple more to come, maybe.
Yeah, where we're headed now. House Minority Leader John Boehner, now the Speaker designate after Republicans regained the upper hand. We heard from him and Eric Cantor just last hour. Here's a part of that.
The American people spoke, and I think it's pretty clear that the Obama-Pelosi agenda is being rejected by the American people. They want, as I said last night, they want the president to change course. And I think it's change course we will.
Change course we will, says Mr. Boehner. Carl Cameron's right here in New York with us. Carl, take us through a little bit of last night. Big winners. Tell us about it.
Lots of big winners, and for some, the night still continues because there are a few undecideds still remaining, obviously. John Boehner is a huge winner, and last night he made it clear that he thought Republicans would not be overly triumphant, not overly exuberant, certainly avoid being arrogant and address the seriousness of what's facing them. Republicans in the House now have to lay out their agenda. Is likely to be much more conservative, and that puts some pressure on the U.S. Senate, where the Republicans weren't able to get the majority. And we've got unresolved business to attend to. In the Senate, there's 3 seats that are unresolved, obviously. Alaska, Colorado, and Washington could be quite some time, though it's not going to likely make any difference in who controls the majority, obviously. But those still remain unresolved. There's more than a dozen House seats, and it won't change the majority. In fact, it could increase the Republican majority considerably as this unfolds. And perhaps sort of most potentially nervous-making for the Obama administration is the unresolved business in the governor's races. The Florida governor's race hasn't been called yet, and there's some indication that Rick Scott, the Republican's quite close and has expressed his confidence that he's going to win. And so the Ohio, Pennsylvania, and potentially Florida governorships could be in the red Republican column as we head into 2012. The presidential race, to see those 3 key battleground states there, means that already President Obama is really worried about who's going to be the winner in 2 years, not who the winner was last night, Martha.
Yeah, I think we move on very quickly in that regard. Carl, thank you very much. Carl Cameron.
We mentioned the Tea Party movement, Martha, certainly helped shape the election of 2010. Now there is one group, at least, the Tea Party Patriots, holding a post-election briefing in Washington. In fact, they are talking about yesterday's results and the future of the Tea Party movement. That room's going to fill up, we're told. and when it does, we'll watch developments and bring them to you. And more on the Tea Party's impact of last night's election a bit later this morning. Also, a slew of high-profile races wrapping up in the Northeast, including the battle for governor in New York. Democrat Andrew Cuomo winning handily, beating Republican rival Carl Paladino. Had some advice to offer here in the Empire State.
As our next governor, you can grab this handle and bring the people with you to Albany. Or you can leave it untouched and run the risk of having it wielded against you. Because make no mistake, you have not heard the last of Carl Paladino.
Rick Leventhal this morning live in New York. How did Cuomo win?
Well, Palladino didn't hold back much, did he? But he did seem to alienate more voters than he won over during the election. He won 4 out of 10 votes, which isn't terrible, but it wasn't enough to derail Cuomo's campaign, which was described as cautious and disciplined.
When they look at the dysfunction and degradation of Albany, they're disgusted, and they are right. And what they are saying today is they want reform, and they want that government in Albany changed, and that's what they're going to get.
Andrew Cuomo won in a landslide. 68% of women, 94% of blacks, 82% of Latinos. Cuomo's father, Mario, the 52nd governor of New York, joined his son on stage for the victory last night. The elder Cuomo famously considered a run for the White House nearly 20 years ago. His son Andrew dropped a bid for governor 8 years ago and now says his first priority is to clean up Albany without a baseball bat.
Go Yankees. O'Donnell, sure. One of the biggest names in this midterm election, could not win in Delaware. Right?
Yeah, no, she couldn't. She was an evangelical outsider who was famous in part for saying she was not a witch. This morning, O'Donnell says she's happy that she gave a voice to many who hadn't been heard, but she also blames the Republican Party for not giving her enough support. Of course, she surprised a lot of people by winning her primary against former Delaware Governor Mike Castle, who was considered a shoo-in to win Vice President Joe Biden's former seat. Instead, it's Democrat Chris Coons who wins by a wide margin and now says his priority is to bring more jobs to Delaware, Bill.
Thank you, Rick. Rick Leventhal is watching things here in the Northeast. Also, Linda McMahon did not win the Senate race in Connecticut, we should point out. Richard Blumenthal, a victor for the Democrats there last night. Martha.
That's right. And let's talk about a big win in the Tea Party in the Sunshine State. Republican Marco Rubio, who, all the pundits said last night is a big name for some time to come in the Republican Party, most likely. The results in this race, in fact, were so lopsided that he was declared the winner shortly after the polls closed in Florida's Panhandle, which is the westernmost part of the state. So check this out. Rubio, what a story this has been. Charlie Crist was the Republican governor, hugely popular, decided that he wanted to run for the Senate seat, left the governor, would have to give up the governorship in that case, and he ran against Rubio, who nobody had ever heard of, ended up hammering him, really, and Kendrick Meek came in with 20% of that vote. Phil Keating has been following this. It's been quite a story. And Phil, in the speech last night, Republican Rubio definitely offered themes of the Tea Party in his ideology and when he spoke.
Absolutely, Martha. Keep in mind, a year and a half ago, Rubio had yet to consolidate Florida's Republican Party, but back then he had the full support of the Tea Party. Last night, it was an absolute festive party in Coral Gables, celebrating what some would say was a race that was far gone weeks and weeks ago. By 8 o'clock, both losers had already called to concede to Marco Rubio. But he did remind everybody listening that even back a year and a half ago, when he was far down, he says his ideology remained the same, and last night he threw out the gauntlet.
And we make a grave mistake if we believe that tonight these results are somehow an embrace of the Republican Party. What they are is a second chance.
Rubio reminding everybody that last night, as he has throughout the campaign, he's not going to D.C. to join the Republican Party en masse. He's going up there with his true beliefs that we need smaller government, lower taxes, and keeping what he calls America exceptional.
Yeah, as he said right there, he said he believes that the GOP won nothing more than a second chance last night. That was a remarkable statement. Let's talk a little bit about the governor's race, Phil. Some real drama is still going on there.
Just as we were reporting all day yesterday, this was a race that really had the promise of being forced to go into a constitutionally required automatic recount, and that's where it remains in that area today. This has yet to be decided. Votes, not all of them have been counted yet. And Sink is not conceding defeat to Scott, although Scott temporarily has a lead here. It's being pegged at 49% to 48%, or more accurately, Scott with 48.81. He's the Republican. Sink with 47.8. Both of them are supposed to speak sometime this morning, possibly in the hour. But as far as a recount, we talked to an expert who worked with the Gore camp back in the 2000 recount.
look has to be on what are the votes that have not been counted yet. There may be some absentees, and there may be some number of provisional ballots in each of the 67 counties. No one knows exactly what those totals may be, and there is still at least some hope that it could be enough to close the gap.
According to the Associated Press, Scott is leading by 53,000 votes. Scott right now is claiming his count is 68,000 votes. Either way, it's going to have to be narrowed down by at least 28 to 40,000 votes to get this recount going.
All right, here we go. In Florida once again. Phil, thanks very much.
Let's gear up for Tallahassee, huh, Martha? Here we go.
Oh, boy.
Pack the kids, we'll make one trip. In a moment here, one of the main storylines from last night, the importance of the governor's races won by Republicans, including South Carolina and Nikki Haley.
18 months ago, I saw a state and a federal government losing control. Arrogant in its spending, arrogant in its responsibility, and a need to step up and say we've got to take our state and our country back.
Former Governor Mike Huckabee is in line after the break to talk about that. Also,
two women who broke the mold, Sarah Palin, John McCain's running mate in 2008, and Geraldine Ferraro, Walter Mondale's VP in 1984. Look at that great picture. They sat down next to each other last night for the very first time ever on television, and it was really something to see. You're going to see it right here at America's Election Headquarters.
well, we knew that it would play a role at the ballot box on Election Day, but how did health care really influence voters? Quite a bit if you look at the Fox News exit polling. 48% want the new Congress to repeal the law, 31% say expand it, 16% say leave it as it is. Nina Easton, Washington columnist for Fortune magazine and a Fox News contributor. Good morning to you after a late night last night.
Yes.
How did it play?
You know, it's interesting because the Democrats are going to try to create the narrative that they did poorly because of the economy. Just the same way that George Bush, when times were tough for him, it was all about the war. But in fact, we can tell from exit polls, from polling going into this, that policies played a huge impact, and particularly health care. And all you have to do is look at, say, Joe Manchin, West Virginia governor, Democrat, who won, trying to distance himself from health care reform, saying we're going to repeal the bad parts of the law. So you saw that all across the board with a lot of these Democrats who are trying to save themselves. And you certainly saw it in the polling for
Joe Manchin, maybe a Democrat in name only, huh?
Yeah, I think that's right.
A dino as opposed to a rhino.
Very good.
Especially in the closing weeks of his campaign in West Virginia. Anyway, he pulled it out.
Yeah.
That's on the Senate side. I think if you look at some of the House votes, actually, in the central part of the country, when you look at some of the House members who broke in favor of the health care legislation, that third week in March, these are the latecomers that helped put it over the top. They were in tough battles. Indiana, Barron Hill loses. Ohio, John Bocelli loses. Ohio, Steve Driehaus loses. Charlie Wilson loses. Mary Jo Kilroy loses. They're all Democrats who voted in favor of health care. And there's your argument for what voters turned out.
And the other thing, that you put your finger on it when you said the middle of the country. When you look at, say, California, which, again, about this question about what role the economy versus policy played, California has one of the highest unemployment rates in the country, and yet Obama has favorable ratings. It's very Democratic, and they held on last night. Same in Nevada. Harry Reid held on. So it wasn't just about the economy. It's middle America. Those between the coasts is where people are rebelling against Obama. And the other thing is that Obamacare, by the way, it's entered the lexicon. If you look at the polling, people know what that means by huge majorities. And 51% of a poll going in, I know you cited one Fox poll, but 51% of the Bill McInturf's poll out of Public Opinion Strategies
was even higher than that?
Even higher.
Well, he called out Tom Perriello in Charlottesville, Virginia, and he lost. He called out Betsy Markey in Colorado, and she lost. Right. Both of them supported health care, too. John Boehner said last hour that they will now have his words, a mandate to reduce the size of government. Then he talked about health care and laying the groundwork.
Yeah.
for going after. What is that groundwork? What shape are we seeing now take place?
That's the problem with all this. I mean, there's not a lot they can do. Barack Obama is not going to repeal health care reform. He's not going to sign something that repeals health care reform. They view that as their landmark piece of legislation. What you will see, so the House will pass it. It'll probably sit on the Senate doorsteps like a cord of wood, and who knows if they'll act on it. The Senate's still Democratic controlled. But what you will see is, I think the president will try to do tort reform, and just make it look like he's trying to compromise and negotiate.
You do?
Yeah. Well, his former budget director, Peter Orszag, has said we should have had more addressing of medical malpractice. So I can imagine the president doing that. But the other thing that you're going to see is out of the House, where they really can have impact, is this House Investigative Committee, which is going to be run by Darrell Issa out of California. He's going to become the House chief investigator. He's going to go after how they administer the new health care legislation, and that's where a lot of these battles are going to brew.
Well, to that extent, he can influence the Republican governors who won so overwhelmingly last night, and they can make the decision whether to implement it or not. There's a provision in the health care law that says federal law can trump state law. So we will watch how.
And we also watch the court cases on that. Very key.
And we shall. Nina Easton, thank you. Late night last night. Thanks for getting up early.
That's great.
You look great.
So do you, Bill.
Well, thank you very much.
You love you when you're not in front of the map, too.
Thank you very much. And Martha looks great, too.
Yeah, there we go.
We're just bolstering each other up here this morning. Thanks very much, you guys. Well, you guys were just talking about this. At least 10 state houses going from Democrat to Republican. This is a huge headline from last night, folks. So what now? Political gridlock, budget shortfalls, huge deficits that these governors are going to have to deal with. Who better to ask than former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee? Knows a lot about running a state, and he will join us with his take on what happened last night next.
Also, they made history. Vice presidential nominees separated by decades. Geraldine Ferraro and Sarah Palin, now making history together. Live on Fox.
You know who should have perhaps talked about it was the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. Remember, she said, though, well, we don't, basically she was suggesting we don't know what's in it. You got to pass it, and then we find out what's in it. That was a bad message there.
Well, perhaps, but I think and I would agree, I'm sure that she knew what was in it, because I've known Nancy a long time, and she is smart as hell.
Talked a lot this morning about the House and also about the Senate, but what about these governor's races that are so critical to figuring out votes in the future, and also this key race for the White House in 2012? Look at the way Republicans went through these governor's races from last night. Now, on the screen, you'll see all the states that light up in gold. These were the governor's races that we were watching last night. I'm going to show you here in the central part of the country, first of all. Well, let's start in Pennsylvania. Republicans won that state house. They won the state house in Ohio, in Michigan, in Wisconsin, in Iowa, caucus in Iowa, and also down here in New Mexico. All these are pickups, and it will go a long way to determining so much by what happens on the state mechanisms inside each state there as we move toward 2012. In Florida right now, this is a race that's frankly too close to call. Rick Scott, the Republican, up against Alex Sink, just about a point separating them on the raw numbers. We may see a recount on that ultimately, but we'll hold our fire on that one. And here's Martha now talking more about just the significance of what we saw in these races, Martha.
Exactly. Thank you so much for setting us up, Bill. And like Bill said, Republicans have picked up 10 gubernatorial offices last night. And as we wait for the results in the last 7 that are too close to call, these are truly going to shape the political landscape as we go forward. So who better to ask about this? Governor Mike Huckabee and the host of Huckabee. Good to see you here this morning,
Well, thank
Governor.
you very much, Martha.
Very much. You know, last night we were watching this. Everybody was watching the congressional races. I kept noticing that these gubernatorial races were popping and turning over one after the other. But you were just saying to me that the significance of this is deeper than it looks.
Much deeper than it looks on two fronts. Number one, when the governors hold that electoral advantage in a state, it does not only something for reapportionment, which is going to be coming up, but it also does something for the infrastructure of that political state. Let me give you an example. When a governor gets in office, he starts appointing hundreds and hundreds of people. So there's patronage that goes to every county, every precinct, all over the state. When a person runs for president, what you want to be able to do is to tap in on an existing train track.
That's already there,
exactly.
Right?
Why have to build a track if it's there? So whoever holds that governor's seat offers to the, let's say, to the candidate of his choice, the Democrat or the Republican, an infrastructure that cannot be equaled. Another thing that we're seeing is deep in the subterranean atmosphere of yesterday's elections, though we focused on the Senate, the House, and the governor races, a lot of races all the way down to state legislatures made a difference. 17 state legislators flipped yesterday. That's huge, because that's the farm team over the next 20 years, the people that will be governor and be senator and be House members. This was a huge election. I said last night that this is a lot like 1811, 1812, when the New Madrid earthquake was so devastating that it made the Mississippi River run backwards. This was a river reversal last night.
Wow, that's an interesting take on it, and I love hearing what you're saying about these legislatures. And when you think about it, you talk about Pennsylvania, Ohio. You were just talking about Texas before, and Bill was pointing out how tight things are still in the Florida governor's race. So when you're running for president, which is now looking closer and closer all the time, less than 2 years away, and you land on the ground, you get off your plane, and you say to the person who greets you, "So what have we got here in this state?" Right? You want them to hook you right in.
It matters, just like it matters for the president as an incumbent to run for re-election, and it's a huge advantage. It's also a huge advantage in that state that that governor is on your side and he's going to be campaigning for you, because chances are the races that are won at that local level, he's going to have a hand in. Legislative, judicial races, all sorts of things. That is an incredibly important infrastructure for whoever the nominees are in the party.
All right, very interesting. Governor Mike Huckabee, always good to see you, sir.
Great to be here, Martha. Thank you.
America's Newsroom. We'll see you soon. Bill, back
all right, Martha, 26 past the hour, and 22 months ago, it did not even exist. Yesterday, though, the Tea Party had its day. Now, where does it go from here, we wonder? We'll talk with a leading member of that group in moments.
And one guy who got some help from his friends in the Tea Party, Kentucky Republican Rand Paul, joins us live with his plans for Washington. Rand Paul, straight ahead.
I have a message. A message from the people of Kentucky. A message that is loud and clear and does not mince words. We've come to take our government back.
All right, this is just crossing in the very tight Florida gubernatorial race. We now expect that Rick Scott will speak. He'll come in front of the cameras at about noon today. Alex Sink came out right after that, just a hair later, saying that she will also come out and speak at 10:45. What they're going to say, we don't know. Very tight race, possible recounts expected in this race. We will bring you all of that as soon as they come to those microphones.
This is a moving target, isn't it?
Sure is.
Yeah, throughout the day, right? Every hour on the hour. Well, the Tea Party proven to be a force to be reckoned with in campaign 2010. A number of favorites getting elected. Others, though, falling short. So how do Tea Party-backed lawmakers go about the business of governing? Matt Kibbe's president and CEO of FreedomWorks. He's back with us now out of Washington, D.C. Also wrote the book, Give Us Liberty. How are you doing today? Good morning.
I'm doing great.
Is that your book or is that Dick Armey's book?
That is our book. We wrote it together.
That's our book. Okay. I just want to give credit where credit's due, okay? How do you evaluate what happened last night? And then I'll drill down in specifics.
Well, I think if you look at the overall electoral map, you saw that the Tea Party agenda of fiscal responsibility and reining in big government redefined the entire political landscape. All Republicans ran on that agenda, and even Democrats like Joe Manchin in West Virginia ran against the Obama economic agenda. So we really own that agenda. So going into November 3rd and the legislative session, I think we have a clear mandate to take on Obamacare and to rein in federal spending. And that's what we expect these new legislators to do.
How do you explain all the money and all the attention that went to Sharon Angle in a state that had the highest unemployment rate of any state, in the 14.4%, and yet Harry Reid still wins? Why?
It really is disappointing that we didn't get Nevada last night, but I would point out that Harry Reid is the second most powerful man in Washington, D.C. he has the benefit of endless amounts of money, endless amount of support of the machine in the state of Nevada, and we just came up short. I don't think that one race defines this election. It's a little bit like scolding your top batter, saying you only batted 800 tonight, and we really wanted you to bat 1,000.
I think that's a fair point with regard to Sharon Angle, but what about if Joe Miller does not pull it out in Alaska? Christine O'Donnell went down easily to Chris Coons in Delaware.
Well, take a step back again and look at, and we're focused on seats that flip from Democrat to Republican, but look at what happened in Florida with Marco Rubio. Look at what happened in Utah, where Mike Lee beat a sitting Republican. There is a very large, substantial, committed class of Tea Party candidates that will be sworn in January, and they're going to define the agenda.
You mentioned Rubio, and I hate to push on time here. We've got some more stuff to get to. Rand Paul also out of Kentucky. What is your expectation for those who won and now, for the first time in American history, take the Tea Party mantle to Washington, D.C. to make change?
Well, the good news is that they are very much unified around the issues in the Contract from America. Most of these candidates have signed on to that. Most of them ran on it. And it essentially is a 10-point plan that is going to define which legislation needs to be introduced, what issues need to be brought to the House and Senate floor. I think you're going to see a very cohesive effort to dismantle Obamacare and to challenge the president. And the big question is whether or not the Obama administration comes back to the middle like Bill Clinton did in 1995.
We're going to hear from him at 1 o'clock this afternoon. In fact, for the first time since I believe it was late Sunday night or a few radio interviews on Monday and Tuesday. Matt Kibbe, thank you for your time out of Washington. And Rand Paul's on deck a bit later, too, a winner in Kentucky last night. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Bill.
All right, Martha.
Well, a bit of history was made last night in America's election headquarters. The only two women ever to be nominated to run as vice presidential candidates sat together and talked on television for the very first time. Sarah Palin sat right next to Geraldine Ferraro. They talked about female candidates and what they face on the campaign trail.
We've seen so many brutal attacks on women in this cycle. Is that just going to be par for the course?
Megan. It was I had the same thing happen to me in 1984. It's just been going on. One of the things that happened when Sarah ran, I never ever criticized her as a woman. Her policies, obviously, I don't agree with.
Fair game, right? That's fair game.
I don't agree with, and I would criticize her policies just as I would anybody else's. But I was so outraged by how Hillary had been treated during the primary that I turned around and I said, that's not what you do. The unfortunate thing is that's happening in both parties, and it's in Alaska, as a matter of fact.
Well, it started.
I don't know about started,
but Governor Palin was attacked grossly during the presidential election, and they came out later and admitted a lot of it was
had also been grossly attacked back in '84, and I remember as a young college student watching what it was that you were going through.
Don't tell me how young you were.
And listen, and knowing that and more power to you for busting that glass ceiling, and standing on the shoulders of Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony and others who had come before you, of course, so many years ago, and then you busting through, and then the opportunity that I and other women following you have been able to seize. That's just been wonderful. It's been great for our nation. It's been so good. But yeah, it kind of seems, Geraldine, like some things haven't changed. There are still the Neanderthals out there who pick on the petty little superficial meaningless things like looks, like whether you can or can't work outside of the home if you have small children, all those type of things where I would so hope that at some point those Neanderthals will evolve into something a bit more with it, a bit more modern and a bit more understanding that, women can accomplish much.
Boy, that was an interesting moment last night. Look at those two great pictures. Geraldine Ferraro was asked if she thought that there would ever be a female president of the United States. She said she wouldn't be surprised if two ran against each other next time around, which I thought was a really interesting comment. There she is with Walter Mondale back in 1984. Sarah Palin, of course, with John McCain just a couple of years ago.
That was a moment, Martha. This might be a moment in Tampa, Florida. This is the Democratic candidate for governor, Alex Sink. Just starting a statement here. Let's listen.
That every morning we will wake up to a new day and to another day. And let's think about today as we look out this window. The sun is shining in Florida. And my greatest hope is that the sun will continue to shine on the state of Florida. Again, thank you so much to the people of Florida for the incredible support.
That is a concession by Alex Sink. She's conceding the race for governor to Rick Scott.
Yesterday,
it is breaking news here in America's election headquarters. Such a tight race, fought hard to the end. Too close to call late last night, but Rick Scott now will be the winner of the governor's race in Florida, a race that will be pivotal yet again 2 years from now in the race for the White House in 2012. So circle another one on that map that we just showed you a short time ago. What, Ohio and Iowa, Michigan, Wisconsin, New Mexico.
Involved in the healthcare industry. He's one of the few business people to break through in those gubernatorial races, and that is interesting. Alex Sink, of course, you remember from the debate, she was the one who took that message on her iTouch and got a lot of heat for it. But that's her concession speech. So another one down. So
we'll wait to hear from Rick Scott. I believe he may talk at 12 Eastern time, so we'll cover that for you. Also, we'll take you back to 1994. Republicans had just taken back control of the House, and it was a Republican revolution headed up by Newt Gingrich. Bill Clinton was in the White House, and when Democrats were handed that crushing defeat, President Clinton said this.
We got plenty of time to worry about the next election. The American people are sick of the one they just had, and they want to get away from politics for a while. I think we should think about the people, their interest. I think we should say, what message were they sending us, and what are we going to do about it?
So what should President Obama do about that today? Alan Colmes, after the break.
And a big victory for Republicans and the Tea Party. Brand new reaction from Senator-elect Rand Paul. He is with us in America's Newsroom. Coming up next. We'll be right back.
Good morning. I'm John Scott. Jenna Lee and I join you at the top of the hour. He might be one of the biggest winners out of last night's election results, but his victory barely drew headlines. Senator Jim DeMint is our guest, considered a Tea Party kingmaker. He has some advice for the incoming class of legislators that could shock you. Big changes coming to Washington. We'll talk with Senator DeMint about this Republican wave and what his party plans to do to put Americans back to work. Also, the South Carolina senator, just part of a powerhouse guest lineup, here to tell us what the next 2 years look like on Capitol Hill. Gridlock or great progress? And our America's Asking Town Hall USA continues today. Send us your questions about the election results and what's next. FoxNews.com/happening now to get involved. Jenna and I will see you in just about 17 minutes.
John, thank you. Just back to this breaking news now in Tampa, Florida. Alex Sink, the Democrat, now conceding that governor's race to Republican Rick Scott. Rick Scott put a lot of money, $73 million into that race. He wins, it appears, by about a point. 49 to 48%, the latest numbers out of Florida. We're waiting on Rick Scott. He apparently is in Fort Lauderdale and will have an announcement at noon Eastern time. It could come before then, too, and if it does, we'll bring you there live down in Florida. But for now, Alex Sink, the Democrat, conceding the governor's race in the all-important state of Florida moments ago.
I'm the president. I'm the leader of the efforts that we have made in the last 2 years. And to whatever extent that we didn't do what the people wanted us to do, or they were not aware of what we had done, I must certainly bear my share of responsibility, and I accept that.
Boy, remember that moment. That was 1994. President Bill Clinton, after the Republicans rode a tidal wave of anti-incumbent sentiment to victory. The contract with America, Newt Gingrich was all what was happening then. They swept both houses of Congress in that moment. So now is the question. Right now, President Obama likely, sitting in his office in the West Wing as he is about to get ready to address the American people and to take questions about what happened last night. So we are joined now by Alan Colmes, who is the host of the Alan Colmes Radio Show. Alan, welcome.
Hi.
Do you think he's going to take the same tack as President Clinton did?
I think it would be smart to. Certainly a little humility. In fact, a little humility on the part of the Republicans wouldn't be a bad idea either, because some of them think this is a mandate for them, which it is not. It is really a statement about
I didn't hear that from them really last night.
Well,
where did you hear that from?
A lot of my listeners.
Really?
A lot of people told them
I really mean that, because you heard John Boehner, you heard a lot of folks come out and say, look, we realize that we are humbled. We have a second chance to go in there and prove to the American people that we can do what they've asked us to do last night.
Carl Palladino didn't sound too humble in his concession speech in New York, but you're right. I think that Boehner, and I know he's being knocked for this. I thought it was very touching that he kind of broke up a little bit last night. I like that he showed some emotion.
He cries to Bill Hemmer all the time.
Yeah, well, I cry everybody, but if I feel like Maureen McGovern, I was telling you, the disaster queen sing in the morning after. But look, the Republicans now have to have a vision. They've been running against Obama. When Mitch McConnell, the head of the Senate, a Republican, I say minority leader rather of the Senate, he wishes he were the head of the Senate, when he says that, all I want to do is make sure Obama's a one-term president without anything else about what they're actually going to try to accomplish.
Let's go back to the initial question, which I'm the one who got off of. But what do you expect President Obama, when he steps out there today, what would you like to hear him say? What should he say?
I think it would be very smart for him to echo, in many respects, the way Bill Clinton handled it in 1994, which is to show humility, to show that, look, we've heard you. We understand that perhaps we weren't always on message. And I think it's been a messaging problem more than anything else. A lot of people, 95% of American families that got tax cuts, perhaps don't even know that they were getting tax cuts. I don't think the message got over the transom during the last couple of years.
We heard you say what?
We heard you say that you want change. We heard you say that you want perhaps maybe even divided government. I'm going to do everything I can do to work with the other side. I'm sure he'll extend olive branches. He called John Boehner last night and they spoke, which was, of course, a very smart, obviously good political move. Absolutely. And hopefully, the two most important people right now in Washington are President Obama and John Boehner.
What he's been saying recently is, Republicans have to get in the back seat, that kind of stuff. We've heard a lot of that. Is it time for him? I guess my real question is, do you think President Obama wakes up this morning and says to himself, you know what, I get it.
Yeah. Well, look,
we're maybe on the wrong track a little bit, and maybe I need to rethink my approach here.
I think that the president needs to say the right words and show humility, but he also, look, I don't think he's governed.
Saying and showing.
All right, but wait. It's got to work both. Martha, it's got to work both ways. When John Boehner didn't really want to go and meet with the White House on health care, when Mitch McConnell says, I just want to get Obama out of office, the Republicans are going to have to show, because they don't have the Senate, they've got to show some willingness to work with the White House. And so far, I've seen none of that, and I've seen no vision on the right. It's got to work both ways.
So
Obama can extend all the other branches.
To be the bigger man. And
he will, and I guess he's a very smart politician. I think he will come off as a bigger man. I don't think up until now the Republicans have come off as the bigger party.
He's the president of the United States.
That's right.
But he's the person that people are looking to for that leadership, that statement. And so there's
I'm sure he will, and I'm sure he'll be knocked by the Republicans for whatever he says. But the Republicans have not shown any willingness on health care. The president's already compromised on health care. He got off single payer. He went away from the public option. He's already shown a tremendous compromise, and it's been unappreciated by the right.
All right, we'll see what his tone is today. I think that's what a lot of people are going to be really listening closely to.
He knows what he's doing.
So we'll see what it is. Alan, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You know what you're doing. That's why we have you here.
Allegedly.
We're going to get back to Florida in a moment here, waiting on Rick Scott to claim victory there in that governor's race in Florida. Also, he is the man of the hour out of Bowling Green, out of the Beltway. Kentucky Senator-elect Rand Paul is live here after the break on how he pulled it off last night. Stay tuned for that.
The American people are unhappy with what's going on in Washington. 11% of the people approve of what's going on in Congress. But tonight, there's a Tea Party tidal wave, and we're sending a message to them.
So a victory last night in Kentucky for Rand Paul. He's still at it this morning. Kentucky Senator-elect Rand Paul is our guest now. I believe you're back in Bowling Green, your hometown. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Bill.
We heard a little clip this morning,
to be with you.
And you as well. Thank you for your time. How do you expect to change Washington?
Well, I go there with optimism. I guess, I've never held office before, so I go there expecting to change the world, and I won't be told otherwise. I think that the American people don't understand how we have to balance our own family budget, but yet Washington doesn't. Congress fails to balance their budget year in and year out, and I think most of us out here in America wish they were forced to balance their budget.
Yeah. There is a debate now as to whether or not Republicans in general compromise with Democrats or the White House. Is compromise acceptable where you come from?
Well, it depends on how you define it. For example, I think we could compromise in the sense that I think we need to cut federal spending. And to me, the conservatives have often said, well, we'll cut domestic spending, but we won't cut anything out of the military. Some liberals who are honest on the idea of the debt have said, well, we'll cut military spending, but we won't cut.
Hang with us one moment. Maybe we'll get him back. Maybe we'll get him back.
Yeah, because that's one of the big issues here. You know, you have a lot of folks who are saying they would cut defense spending, cut the Department of Education. You know, the kinds of things that have been discussed on this campaign trail are pretty dramatic by Washington standards. And folks like Rand Paul have said that they would, you know, have the guts and the courage to go for those things.
Yeah, it was an emotional speech on his behalf last night. He said he's got a message, and he delivered that last night in powerful form. Rand Paul has worked tirelessly. I don't know if the guy went to bed last night.
No, he didn't sound like he did.
And if he did, I mean, it was maybe a cat nap for 15 or 20 minutes.
These
But
people have to be running on adrenaline. I saw Nikki Haley, you know, on 7 different places this morning. The adrenaline is all you can possibly imagine that is keeping them going at this point.
So
because that campaign trail is brutal.
Yeah, and when he is sworn into office in the new Congress in the 3rd week of January, Rand Paul will be one of the people to watch.
Yeah.
What sort of influence will he wield? What sort of attention will he get? And ultimately, what sort of progress will he make? Because the country is watching to see whether or not people like Paul and this Tea Party movement that was not even around 22 months ago will have any impact on America.
We're going to try to get him back, and we'll
Sure
be right
will.
back. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
I mean, it's just too good to. It's
know.
too good not to run it again. Roll this here. The incumbent Democratic Congressman Ed Perlmutter, Colorado, celebrating victory, baby. That's what victory looks like to him.
Look at that.
Came on stage, pulled off the cartwheel.
Can you do a cartwheel, Bill?
I guess I could try it. I don't know how I'd feel after it. That is classic. He defeated his challenger, Republican Ryan Frazier, in one of the state's swing districts. During the campaign, Perlmutter regularly did cartwheels as an attention grabber, and he got it in this race.
As an attention grabber. That'll grab your attention, all right.
That it will.
And you know what? It worked.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knew his name. Oh, yeah, he's the cartwheel guy.
He's Mr. Cartwheel.
We're sorry we couldn't get Rand Paul back, but we'll talk to him later on about that.
So there's a lot to chew over in the coming hours, and also the coming days, too. And a lot of the themes that came out of last night will be digested and analyzed, not just by us, but the rest of our Fox News team.
I still want to know what happens in Alaska.
Right, and so we encourage you to stay with us for all the results of the race that haven't been called just yet, but also where are we now as a country, and where are we headed, and what does the president say at 1 o'clock, and how do Republicans respond in kind? It is a fascinating time, not just to be in our business, but to be in this country. So we wait to see how it all turns out.
And we thank all of you for coming along this ride with us. Got a long way to go. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
Bye.
And we thank you for staying with us for extended coverage of all the results and everything else under the sun today. Hello, everybody. I'm Jenna Lee.
And I'm John Scott. We're here in the Fox Newsroom. Happening now, a huge night for Republicans as the GOP sweeps the House, makes gains in the Senate, and wins key governor's races across the country. And election night is not even over yet. We're still waiting for the results of 3 Senate races we've been closely following, all featuring incumbents fighting to keep their jobs. In Colorado, Democrat Michael Bennet and his Republican challenger Ken Buck now neck and neck and looking at a possible recount. They are within a few thousand votes of each other. In Washington state, incumbent Democrat Patty Murray is facing her toughest re-election bid yet. She holds a razor-thin lead over Republican Dino Rossi, but Murray says she's confident she will prevail. And in Alaska, we know the write-in candidate won, but we don't know how many of those votes went to Lisa Murkowski. That could potentially set up a rematch between Murkowski and the man who upset her in the Republican primary, Tea Party favorite Joe Miller.
Well, here's the Senate balance right now. You have Democrats still in control there with 49 seats. Republicans now have 46 seats. Over on the House side, a GOP sweep with Republicans taking over there. Right now, they've got 239 seats to the Democrats' 185. That means John Boehner becomes the House Speaker designate, and the current whip, Eric Cantor, will likely be majority leader there. Also, Boehner and other GOP members, leadership now set to speak at the bottom of the hour. So we'll be looking for that and bringing you those comments live. Molly Hennenberg is live at the Russell Rotunda on Capitol Hill today. So, Molly, what kind of mandate, really, if any, here do Republicans think they have after last night?
Hi, Jenna. Hi, John. A soon-to-be GOP House Speaker, John Boehner, says the results from last night, a pickup of more than 60 seats in the House and gains in the Senate, show that voters want to, quote, gives them a, quote, mandate for Washington to reduce the size of government. It also shows a, quote, repudiation of big government. Here's more from John Boehner.
Well, the American people spoke, and I think it's pretty clear that the Obama-Pelosi agenda is being rejected by the American people. They want, as I said last night, they want the president to change course. And I think it's changed course we will.
Rounding out the expected GOP leadership come January, Virginia Congressman Eric Cantor is expected to be majority leader, and California Congressman Kevin McCarthy is expected to be the majority whip, the nose counter, if you will, when it comes to big votes. Boehner and Cantor said today that the Republicans first will focus on economic issues, but also that they intend to, quote, lay the groundwork for repeal or replacement of the health care legislation, which Boehner today called a, quote, monstrosity. Jenna?
All right, Molly, but Democrats still hold quite a bit of governing power in our government right now, correct?
Right. The Democrats still have the Senate and the White House, although in the Senate the margin certainly is closer with the Republicans picking up seats there. It's going to force a lot of debate on issues. But Democrats say, hey, the president's party often loses seats in the midterm elections, but they point to Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. He held on in Nevada. He won against a Tea Party favorite and Republican challenger Sharon Angle. They also got high-profile victories in Delaware, California, and West Virginia. But the Reid win, that was the marquee event, the marquee matchup, and significantly, it's a symbolic win for Democrats. Senator Reid said in a statement today, quote, the time for politics is now over, and now that Republicans have more members in both houses of Congress, they must take their responsibility to present bipartisan solutions more seriously. Simply saying no will do nothing to create more jobs, support our middle class, and strengthen our economy. And as you're saying, Jenna, earlier, it's still undecided in Alaska and Washington State. But even if those go Republican way, it's not enough to take over the control of the Senate.
Yeah, still Jenna? A lot to watch. A developing story, Molly Henningberg in D.C. Thanks, Molly.
Thank you.
So much political intrigue after running for months against the Washington ruling establishment. A number of Tea Party-backed candidates have won elections, transforming them into power players now. Fox News has learned there's a draft, if you will, for the leader of the Tea Party caucus in the House, Michelle Bachmann, to move into the House leadership. So how will the newly elected members of the Tea Party impact the Republicans? Steve Centani is live in Washington. Give us that rundown, Steve.
Right. Well, of course, they're looking ahead to having a much more say, much more power in the new Congress. And Tea Party patriots hailed the election results as a victory for liberty and a repudiation of what they call a government takeover of health care. Now, the grassroots movement scored some key wins, including Rand Paul's victory in Kentucky. He defeated State Attorney General Jack Conway by 12 percentage points, helping the GOP take 6 new Senate seats. And in Florida, Tea Party favorite Marco Rubio swept a victory in a 3-way race, carrying 47% of the vote. The Tea Party patriots today said the election brings new blood and new energy to Capitol Hill.
Yesterday, we witnessed something historic. We witnessed a sea change in the American government. It was a peaceful sea change, and our founding fathers were brilliant. They set up a constitution that allowed us to conduct a peaceful revolution every 2 years.
And a lot of talk among these Tea Party patriots about repealing health care, John.
But there were also some notable defeats for the Tea Party faithful. What's the reaction on that?
Well, they're claiming an overall victory, although, of course, Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, as Molly mentioned, was able to hang on in Nevada. He was under fire from Tea Party Republican Sharon Angle, but will now go on to lead a Senate with 6 fewer Democrats. And in Delaware, as expected, Tea Party favorite Christine O'Donnell, a lightning rod for criticism on both sides of the aisle, soundly defeated by Democrat Chris Coons. Now, Tea Party leaders said today the vote is a repudiation of President Obama's policies, but they say they're offering an olive branch and are willing to work with the president. John.
Steve Centani in Washington for us. Thank you, Steve.
Well, another big story we're watching today. We're getting new information on the international mail bomb terror plot. The Fed saying the plotters didn't know where those wired packages would be when they were set to explode. In the meantime, in San Diego, 3 men are under arrest, charged with helping terrorists in Somalia. National correspondent Catherine Herridge is following all these developments. So, Catherine, let's start off in San Diego. 2 of those California men due in court this morning. Who are they, and what are they accused of doing?
Well, they're accused, Jenna, of providing material support to a terrorist organization, in this case, the al-Qaeda affiliate in East Africa called al-Shabaab. And according to the Justice Department documents, what's significant in this particular case is that the men are accused of having direct telephone contact with one of the Shabaab's military commanders in Somalia and providing money to him directly in order to fund their war effort there. So that's sort of a step up in terms of the kind of plots or alleged plots we've seen here in the United States, Jenna.
And so just to be clear, Catherine, not related to this mail bomb plot that we've been talking a lot about. Okay, well, let's go to the mail bomb plot then. We're learning more about these devices. It's still very much a developing story here. So what additional information have we learned about this?
Well, as we were first to report, according to a senior U.S. official, there is growing evidence that both bombs included cell phone detonators that were linked to the alarm function. And while the investigation is ongoing, we're told it potentially means no phone service was necessary for the bombs to explode. And investigative sources tell Fox the working theory is that the bombs picked up in England and Dubai were meant to blow up in or over the United States. Now, a short time ago, we had a statement from Britain's Home Secretary, and it reads in part, "The specifics of this attack, notably the type of device and how it was concealed, were new to us. The principle of the attack, a device placed in unaccompanied baggage, was not. It bears some resemblance to the attack on Pan Am 103 over Lockerbie in 1988. And that was the attack when the American jet came down after a cassette recorder in the cargo hold blew up and brought down the flight. And I'm told that the link, if you will, is this unaccompanied baggage and not the style of device, at least based on the preliminary investigation, Jenna."
Catherine Herridge with some brand new information for us today. Catherine, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Jobs, taxes, spending, the economy, those the big issues of this election season. And then some thugs in Yemen put sophisticated bombs on airplanes bound for the United States, putting voters on edge about terrorism. The powerful House Armed Services Committee is significantly changed in the new Congress, but it's the president who prosecutes our wars as commander-in-chief and takes the lead on foreign policy. Will Mr. Obama change course at all as a result of your votes yesterday? Some thoughts on that now from John Bolton, the former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. Interesting, Mr. Ambassador, that on Friday, Mr. Obama will leave on this long-delayed trip to India and other parts of the world. Why?
Well, he's basically attending a G20 summit in Korea, and he's added on some other stops, Indonesia, that he's had to cancel twice before. But it's an interesting question now that Congress has been changed so significantly, whether President Obama will fall prey to the temptation that other presidents have when you're gridlocked on your domestic policy. Do you emphasize foreign policy more? And so this trip really highlights that choice for him.
Bill Clinton made that shift after Republicans took over the Congress in '94, didn't he? He started paying more attention to events overseas.
Well, he did. He also triangulated, in his famous phrase, domestically and moved more toward the center. So these are choices for President Obama. At this point, he's the only one that knows what direction he's going to go in. But you can certainly say that in this election, I mean, unfortunately, from my perspective, there was very little discussion of foreign and national security policy. So he's not at all constrained in that sense by the outcome yesterday.
Do you see him making any changes in policy as a result of the vote result?
Well, I think in foreign policy terms, he has some immediate decisions coming up that could give us a signal one way or the other. There's every indication, for example, he's going to try and jam his arms control treaty with Russia through the lame duck Senate session. I certainly hope senators block that. In December, he has a previously scheduled consideration of his Afghanistan policy to see how things are going. Will he continue with his pledge to begin withdrawing American troops in the summer of next year? So even before the first of the year, there are some key indicators that the president's going to have to show his hand one way or the other on foreign policy, I think.
Does he look politically weaker overseas? I mean, 2 years ago, he was the incoming president who could walk on water. Now voters seem to have repudiated much of his platform as a result of these election results. What does that do to him when it comes to overseas perceptions?
Well, two things. I think most Europeans don't understand the American separation of powers. They don't appreciate, because they have parliamentary systems, they don't appreciate what this really means for the president domestically. But in addition, the Constitution really confides the initiative, the bulk of the authority in foreign and national security policy to the president. So I think he can continue. He obviously has to worry about Congress on budget fronts and things like that. But the direction of foreign policy is largely a presidential issue, to the extent that President Obama wants to pay attention to it. His first 2 years have been marked by real inattention to foreign policy. And as I said before, the key now is, will he shift, given that he is gridlocked effectively on his domestic policy agenda?
Former UN Ambassador John Bolton. Ambassador, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, he won re-election easily in South Carolina, but there's more to the story when it comes to Senator Jim DeMint. He also helped get Republicans and Tea Party candidates elected all over this country. We have a live report on that next, and we talk to Senator Jim DeMint live next hour, by the way. Also, time for election reflection. Has a ring to it, doesn't it? We've got a great Town Hall USA panel lined up, and we're going to put your questions to them in the next hour.
Also, we've had a huge response to our town hall. Keep those questions and comments coming in. You can log on to foxnews.com, link to our chat right there on the homepage, or go to foxnews.com/happeningnow to post on our blog, send us a tweet or an email. America's asking, and we have the answers.
We're glad you're with us inside America's election headquarters, and some are calling this man a conservative kingmaker, at least for this midterm. Senator Jim DeMint easily won re-election in South Carolina last night, as expected, and many of the Tea Party-backed Republican candidates he endorsed and backed financially also claimed victories. Some we're still unsure about. Jonathan Seri is live in Atlanta. So, Jonathan, what exactly did Senator DeMint do to help get some of these candidates elected?
Hi, Jenna. Well, Senator DeMint's opponent, Democrat Alvin Green, faced very little support from within his own party and also some legal trouble. And that really freed DeMint up to spend nearly $2 million of his own campaign funds on other candidates, including fiscal conservatives running for U.S. Senate in other states.
His seat is pretty secure. And what happened during this election is likely to happen in future elections if the climate stays the same. So he would definitely be somebody you'd want to be friends with.
DeMint's Political Action Committee, the Senate Conservatives Fund, raised a total of $5 million and supported the candidacies of Rand Paul of Kentucky, Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania, and Marco Rubio of Florida, just to name a few, Jenna.
Jonathan, DeMint went through, some controversy, a little controversy when he was working against, it seems, some of the established GOP leaders during the primaries. Has there been any fallout over that?
There has indeed. He has alienated some establishment Republicans who say that DeMint's support of, for example, Sharon Angle in Nevada and Christine O'Donnell in Delaware, who both lost, by the way, they say that may have cost Republicans chances of establishing a majority in the Senate. But DeMint says the GOP needs to practice what it preaches when it comes to limited government and less public spending, even if that means butting heads with other Republicans or doing away with popular earmarks. Listen.
I've tried to be a team player with Republicans for years. I mean, this is my 12th year in the Congress, 6 in the House and 6 in the Senate. And I decided a couple of years ago that that wasn't working.
And DeMint published an op-ed in today's edition of the Wall Street Journal urging these new Republican faces on Capitol Hill to avoid the political strings that are usually attached to titles and committee assignments. Jenna?
And one of the interesting figures to emerge from these midterms, a little different from where he started. Jonathan, thank you so much for that report. We're going to be following up with this as well. Senator Jim DeMint joins us a little less than an hour from now. He's going to talk live about what's next. What's next with some of these Republican victories, the Tea Party movement, and why he's doing this. Why is he urging newly elected conservatives not to get coerced by current Republican leadership? Why? Why does he want them to fight them instead? We'll ask him those questions coming up in about an hour.
All right, so what was the big issue for you? Seems like Americans voted their wallets this election. The economy is the top issue for a lot of folks, and right now we are awaiting a huge announcement from the Federal Reserve. Is another massive stimulus on the way? And if it comes, will it help? Also looming large, the expiration of the Bush tax cuts. Many Republicans want them extended for everyone. Can they get that done with their new power on Capitol Hill?
Services and underwriting expertise. Zurich Help Point. Help when it matters most.
Experience a new level of global networking. For life on a whole new scale.
Excellence in flight. Korean Air.
The everyday things we depend on are simple, not complicated, complete, not confusing, like AARP Medicare Complete from Secure Horizons, a Medicare Advantage plan. You depend on Medicare, so we've made it simple. It may offer hospital, doctor visits, prescription drug coverage, and other medical services, all the necessary pieces, in one simple plan. Often for no more than you currently pay for original Medicare. Call Secure Horizons today to find out how you may even end up with a $0 monthly plan premium. Why pay for the separate pieces when AARP Medicare Complete can put them together in one complete package? Getting the right Medicare Advantage coverage isn't complicated and confusing. It's simple. Annual enrollment starts November 15th and ends December 31st. So don't delay. Call Secure Horizons today about AARP Medicare Complete. Be covered, not confused.
Military, taxes, health care. America wants to slash government, so what needs to go and how will D.C. respond? Casey, Lott, and Huckabee react tonight on Your World.
So if anyone anywhere scratches one of these, I'm going to feel it?
No, you're not. You're a Mega Millions ball. This is a Mega Millions scratch-off. I'm a Powerball. This is a Powerball scratch-off.
Oh, I just thought something.
You did not.
Oh, there it is again.
Really? Yeah. You feel that?
Now all the excitement of Powerball and Mega Millions is available in a scratch-off game. Play anytime, and you could scratch your way to $100,000 instantly.
It's a fact. 40,000 businesses close their doors every month. Attention business owners, if you're getting collection calls, letters, levies, and don't take action, you could lose your business. However, if you want to pay your creditors, there is a solution without bankruptcy. If you need a loan, if you have tax problems, if you've used credit cards to support your business, you can get help before it's too late. Call Corporate Turnaround now or visit them on the web for free information and a free consultation.
Well, right now, exit polling overwhelmingly showing the economy is the number one concern for voters. 62% of those surveyed calling it the most important issue facing this country today. More than 3 times more than the issue about health care, even. The stimulus plan, of course, a huge election issue. And right now, we're waiting for the Fed around 2:15 today. We're expecting them to talk a little bit about more stimulus to come. That plan includes pumping another $500 billion into the U.S. economy. Let's talk a little bit more about that. Ed Lazier is the former chief economic advisor to President George W. Bush, and he's our guest today. So when we're talking about that $500 billion stimulus from the Fed, we're not talking about, shovel-ready projects and things like that. What are we talking about there?
Right. In fact, I would say that the problem that we face right now with the Fed is the same problem that really was mirrored in last night's election, and that's bang for the buck. So if you think about what the government has been doing for the past couple of years. They've been investing in fiscal policy, trying to stimulate the economy, and unfortunately the unemployment rate's still above 9.5%. So the question is, can the Fed do something that will create some bang for the buck? And the bang for the buck that they're hoping for is to buy at the longer end of securities, and that's kind of a technical difficulty that they face right now because they've already used up their ability to do it at the shorter end. And we already know that it wasn't so effective at the shorter end, so the question is, do we expect it to be effective at the long end?
So the thinking there is they buy into this market and they keep interest rates down so companies and individuals can borrow money really easy. Get that money flowing into the economy. But will that actually create jobs?
Well, again, that's the problem. It hasn't really done so effectively in the past. Now, I'm not critical of the Fed on that. I think the Fed did what they had to do. But the problem is that you can't expect these things to be all that powerful. First of all, we know that even if they work, it takes a long time for them to work.
How long?
About a year to 2 years, and that's the standard estimate that the Fed uses. So about half of the power comes out after about a year, the other half trickles out over the next year. So unfortunately, we're talking about something that's going to hit over the next couple of years, and I think the Fed's view is, look, we don't know where the economy is going to be 2 years from now, and if 2 years from now things are still weak, we will regret not having done something right now.
Mr. Lazier, there's a lot of comments about tax cuts and extending those Bush tax cuts. I should mention you were a part of the Bush administration, not during the time when the tax cuts were being passed. What do we do? How do we create jobs here? Is it only a tax issue, or is there more than that we have to look at?
I think, first of all, I think we should not think in terms of the government creating jobs. I think that's just a bad way to put it, because the government doesn't create jobs. The only governments that created jobs were the Soviet Union, countries like that. We know that didn't work out so well.
But the public turns to the government and says, hey, we need help.
But what the government needs to do is create an environment where job growth is positive. And in order to do that, the best way to do it is to stimulate investment, because investment is really the source of demand for labor.
So what would that be like?
Well, that would mean keeping the rate of return on investment high. So what do we mean by rate of return? It simply means that businesses make money when they invest. One key to that is certainly taxes. If we raise taxes right now, I think it would be problematic, not only because it takes money out of the economy. I think that's secondary. The primary effect is that it discourages businesses from making the kinds of investment decisions that they need to make in order to hire labor.
I got to run, but is there anything else besides tax cuts? If you give us one phrase or one word for this new government to look at.
Well, I think what we need to do is we need to think about an open economy that encourages trade, has freedom to do the kinds of things that businesses are good at doing, and we have to rely on that. That's all that's ever worked in the past. That's all that will work in the future.
Some of those trade issues are expected to be brought up in the next Congress. Mr. Lazier, great to have your perspective.
Thank you.
Really
Pleasure
nice
to be
to have
with
you on set. John?
Jenna, thanks very much. So many people in California were geared up for that big ballot issue. What about legalizing marijuana? How did that go? Did folks, are they saying they can legally light up today, or did voters just say no? We'll update you on that. We're also waiting for the GOP leadership to speak to reporters. Speaker-designate John Boehner will be joined by Governor Haley Barbour and Senate Leader Mitch McConnell on Capitol Hill any minute now. What's their plan after the sweeping results last night? We'll have those remarks for you live right here on Happening Now.
Lawyers.com. Every legal issue, one legal source.
Hi, everybody. This is a Fox News alert. Right now, we're awaiting a major news conference with the GOP leadership. House Republican leader John Boehner, Senate GOP leader Mitch McConnell, and Haley Barbour. He's the governor from Mississippi, also the head of the Republican Governors Association. They're all set to speak about moments from now. We're expecting them. This after the GOP's sweep in the House, at least, and some gains, at least, also in the Senate. When they start talking, they take to the mic. We'll bring them to you.
A very big night last night, and a lot of the drama coming from out west. The Senate races in Washington and Alaska are still undecided as of right now, as a high-profile ballot initiative in California goes up in smoke. Trace Gallagher in our West Coast newsroom covering it all for us. Let's start with that Alaska Senate race. What do we know, Trace?
Well, you know that lawyers are already booking their tickets to get up there, John, because this thing, they're going to have a lot of contested ballots up there, some recounts. As it stands right now, the write-in candidate is leading Joe Miller 41% to 34%. That would seem to be very good news for Lisa Murkowski to keep her job right. But keep in mind, that's for all of the write-in candidates. They don't know the names yet on those write-in ballots. So that's a big sticking point here. Now, the lieutenant governor up in Alaska who oversees the election says that they will start to look at these names sometime in the next 3 or 4 days. They were saying November 18th. Now they've moved that up to the next 3 or 4 days. Remember, the last write-in candidate to win a Senate seat was Strom Thurmond way back in 1954, and now Lisa Murkowski is hoping to keep her seat with a very big write-in campaign, John.
So what about the Washington Senate race, Trace?
Yeah, Patty Murray is trying to stop the Republican steamroller up there. And at last check, this thing is very, very close. We got Patty Murray up by about 14,000 votes. They both, Dino Rossi and Patty Murray, at 50% right now. In Washington state, King County is king. King County is where Seattle is. 1 out of every 3 voters is in Seattle. It's largely Democratic. And right now, Patty Murray is dominating King County. 62% of the vote to Dino Rossi's 38%. The experts had said all along for Dino Rossi to be very competitive in this race, he needs to tick above 40% in King County. So far, he has not done that, John.
And what about those California races? They were not nearly as close as we thought they were going to be.
No, surprising, you know, Governor Jerry Brown was the youngest governor back in 1975 in California history. Now he's the oldest governor in California history. He was 38. Now Jerry Brown is 73. Not even close there. I mean, Jerry Brown dominated this race here. Meg Whitman spent more money on her own campaign than anyone in history, $140 million. In the Senate race, again, the experts thought this would be much closer. This was called very early in the evening. Barbara Boxer pretty much dominating Carly Fiorina. Fiorina just kind of dropped off the books over the last 2 or 3 weeks, though she still has not made any kind of statement about losing that race. And Proposition 19, the legalization of marijuana, drum roll please. It's not going to happen. It really lost a lot of steam. It went down 54 to 46%. And even as few as 2.5 months ago, John, this thing was really going to be a nail biter. And then all of a sudden, the advocates just kind of lost steam in the waning days of the campaign, John.
Meg Whitman, almost $5 a vote and didn't win.
Didn't win. It's good math, though.
Trace Gallagher, Thanks very much.
Okay.
You want to know why so many people moved to California? Take a look at these pictures in just this morning to the Fox Newsroom from our friends at KTTV. Big surf in Malibu. Yeah, there was a Republican wave last night, but big waves in California right now. The surfers are lapping it up out there in Malibu.
I guess we can't count on those surfers to be on our town hall today, right?
No,
they're probably busy.
I don't think they're going to be on the laptops from Malibu.
Well, you never know. You never know who's going to show up on the town hall USA panel. We have a lot of your questions pouring in as we speak. If you just go to foxnews.com and you click on the link on the homepage right there, it takes you right to America's Asking. And Harris is monitoring all the chats that are going on. You're chatting away, right, Harris?
Cowabunga, baby. We love a good wave. Yeah, Tina and I are a couple of California girls. The Alaska race, there's some debate over how many write-in names there are on the ballot and what that's going to look like when they start to count them. Since we got the word earlier that it was the write-in candidate who won, how do you legitimize that, and so on and so forth. That's what the chat's concentrating on. And another issue, John Sochi writes, I want to know also what happened to the military ballots. Rick Chesniak says, yes, what happened to the military ballots? Margaret Knight says, yes, Fox, what's going on with the military ballots? Maybe we can put that one to the panel. Get on with us. FoxNews.com. Look at the top of the page. John and Jenna's gorgeous photo. Click on it. It'll take you to our Happening Now page. You have some options. You can email, blog, or get on the live chat. And we will include your comments and questions. It's all about you. And glad you're a part of the program. So glad to have you. We'll be right back.
Taking you straight to D.C. now, and John Boehner. Let's listen in.
And reforming the way Congress does its business. It's not just what the American people are demanding. It's what they are expecting from us. And the real question now is this. Are we going to listen to the American people? Republicans have made a pledge to America, and our pledge is to listen to the American people and to focus on their priorities, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Last night, the president was kind enough to call me. We discussed working together on the American people's priorities, cutting spending, creating jobs. And we hope that he will continue to be willing to work with us on those priorities. But as I said last night, the new majority here in Congress will be the voice of the American people, and I think we clearly expressed that last night. We're going to continue and renew our efforts for a smaller, less costly, and more accountable government here in Washington, D.C. I also want to say thanks to my two colleagues. As most of you know, Senator McConnell and I have worked very closely together over the last 5 years or so. Haley Barbour and I have been friends for the last 20 years, and we have a real partnership, and I'm proud to stand here today with both of them. Mitch?
Well, at the risk of this sounding like a mutual admiration society, let me also say what a pleasure it's been to work with John the last 4 years in our leadership roles. And I, too, have known Haley for 20 years, a great friend, and this is a happy day for the three of us. But let me make a few observations as well. We are indeed humbled and ready to listen to the American people and to lead on the issues that they've clearly indicated they care about. We're determined to stop the agenda Americans have rejected and to turn the ship around. We'll work with the administration when they agree with the people and confront them when they don't. I think what our friends on the other side learned is that choosing the president over your constituents is not a good strategy. This election yesterday was clearly a referendum on the administration and the Democratic majority here in the Congress. Ignoring the voters and their wishes, as you could see during the entire 2-year period, produces predictable results. And the health care bill, in my view, was sort of a metaphor for the government excess that we witnessed over the last 2 years. The American people watched the government running banks, insurance companies, car companies, taking over the student loan business, and then they said, now they're taking my health care as well, and I think it just became the tipping point during the course of the last 2 years. I would say to our friends on the other side of the aisle, and listening to what they've had to say this morning, they may have missed the message somewhat. I get the impression they're thinking, their view is that we haven't cooperated enough. I think what the American people were saying yesterday is that they appreciated us saying no to the things that the American people indicated they were not in favor of. So I think the group that should hopefully get the message out of yesterday's elections is our friends on the other side of the aisle. And we hope that they will pivot in a different direction, work with us on things like spending and debt and trade agreements and nuclear power and clean coal technology and other things the president has said that he's for, that most of my members are for. So the question is, how do we meet in the middle? And it seems to me the best strategy for the other side would be to listen to the voters yesterday. They made a clear statement about what they'd like to see done. If the president comes in our direction, obviously we want to make progress for the country over the next 2 years. With that, let me turn to Governor Barbour.
Thank you, Mitch. John, thank you for allowing me to be here. On behalf of the Republican governors, while governors' races may be thought of as being separate or very different from what's going on in Washington, in this case, even in governors' races, this election was a referendum on Obama's policies, and the policies of the Obama administration, the Pelosi-Reed Congress, were repudiated by the voters. Governors, and I would say a lot of Democratic governors, I believe, will agree with this, going forward, governors believe that we can work with the Congress to try to set things in a better direction. The voters yesterday voted against excessive spending, piling up deficits, trillions of dollars of new debt being loaded on our children and grandchildren, a huge tax increase right around the corner in January, and a government-run healthcare system. We governors, because almost all of us have to have a balanced budget, we have to cut spending. I can remember when my career in Washington was going on, a spending cut was the department's budget was supposed to go up 8%. It only went up 5%, so that's a 3% cut. In state governments, we have learned to make real cuts, and we've learned to do it while providing services. And I hope that will be something that will be an example for the new Congress. We look forward to working with them and appreciate their support in helping us get here. Thank you.
Leader Boehner, have you spoken to Nancy Pelosi today, and how do you see yourself integrating all this Tea Party activism into the structure of the House?
The Speaker attempted to reach me this morning, left me a very nice voicemail, and I expect that we will have a very smooth transition with her office. What unites us as Republicans will be the agenda of the American people. And if we're listening to the American people, I don't see any problems incorporating members of the Tea Party along with our party in the quest that's really the same. They want us to cut spending and focus on creating jobs in America.
What do you think prospects are for this year, Congress doing the Bush tax cut renewal, and would you be open to some sort of a less than permanent continuation?
We continue to believe that extending all of the current tax rates for all Americans is the right policy for our economy at this time.
Mr. Boehner, what made you cry last night? And secondly, if you can bring civility back to the House.
Most of you know it gets a little difficult to talk about my background or talk about my family, and I thought I was going to be in good shape, but not as good as it turned out.
Mr. Boehner, the exit polls last night said that 53% of Americans had an unfavorable view of the Republican Party, almost the same as the Democratic Party. So what does that tell you about how you have to govern and perhaps what's the Democrats?
It tells me that what we need to do is to listen to the American people. They sent a very loud message last night, not only to the House and to the Senate, but if you look at the number of Republican governors that won, the number of Republican legislative bodies that won, it's pretty clear the American people want a smaller, less costly, and more accountable government here in Washington, D.C. And if the American people see us doing things that they're telling us to do, I think we'll do just fine. Trish.
Mr. Leader, I know that all of you, and Senator McConnell, this is for you too, I know that all of you have been reading about 94 and how, the mistakes and pitfalls of your colleagues, which you were actually part of. I wonder what are the lessons you take away from that? How will you govern differently this time? And Senator McConnell, how does it affect what you will do in the Senate since you don't have a majority now?
Well, I think it's important to listen to the American people. There are more Americans engaged in our government today than I've ever seen in my lifetime. And I think the real key to having real success for the American people is to keep the American people engaged in this process beyond last night. The government will do exactly what the American people demand every day, nothing more, nothing less, if they stay engaged in the process. And I'm very hopeful that they will.
Do you want me to address that? Well, I think clearly the election yesterday did not transfer full control of the government to the opposition. It was a first step in the direction of changing what we've been doing in Washington. There are two opportunities for that change to occur. Our friends on the other side can change now and work with us to address the issues that are important to the American people that we all understood. Or further change obviously can happen in 2012. But in the meantime, we were sent here to work on the people's business. And over in the Senate, where a majority is not enough in any event, and it takes 60 votes to do most things, it's clear that we're going to have some kind of bipartisan agreement. And hopefully that will be on the issues of spending and debt, which is what the American people are asking us to address. In other words, I anticipate, we'll see, but I anticipate enough Democrats to come in our direction on spending and debt to where we can actually make progress for the American people.
Mr. Boehner, there is, differing points of view in your Congress about what to do about earmarks, what to do about the debt limit. Mr. Kansler and Mr. McCarthy said we'll only have a vote up or down to raise or not raise the debt limit here. How are you going to be able to operationally do some of these things when there are competing factors in your conference on what to do on these two issues?
Well, that's what the transition's for. Give us a little time to figure out how we do those big things that need to be done on behalf of the American people.
Mr. Boehner, can you tell us a little bit more about your conversation with the president? Did you discuss any areas of common agreement? Are there any?
Like I said, the president and I had a very pleasant conversation. We agreed that we needed to listen to the American people. We needed to work together on behalf of the American people. And I look forward to having the opportunity to talk with him about those areas where we can move together.
Do you see any areas of common agreement with the
Yes,
president right now?
Mr. Boehner, next Congress, it looks like one of the first early tests will be increasing the debt limit. Tea Party, the way the Tea Party candidates are likely to oppose that. How will you work with them to achieve it?
We'll be working that out over the next couple of months. Yes, sir. I believe that operating under the 2008 levels of spending before the bailouts, before the stimulus, is a responsible way forward.
You cut program, are you going to formalize this sort of link between American people online and, your administration in the Capitol?
We are going to continue to talk to the American people every day, and we're going to continue to listen to the American people every day. And programs like UCUT, programs like America Speaking Out, and some other ideas that we'll outline here in the coming days will be intended to provide the American people a forum and a vehicle to talk to us so that we can, in fact, listen every day.
We know that House Republicans have pledged to repeal and replace the president's health care reform, but you've got an upcoming appropriations process. Do you plan to try and use that appropriations process to defund the reform law?
Listen, I believe that the health care bill that was enacted by the current Congress will kill jobs in America, ruin the best health care system in the world, and bankrupt our country. That means that we have to do everything we can to try to repeal this bill and replace it with common sense reforms that will bring down the cost of health insurance. All right, last one.
Mr. Boehner, what about financial reform, specifically the Dodd-Frank bill? Do you have plans to try and change that? Do you hope to change that in the session? Do you expect that expensive bankers will take it?
I think one of the things that Congress has not done a very good job of over the last 15 years is real oversight. And I'm not talking about gotcha oversight. I'm talking about rock-solid oversight of the executive branch, which is a constitutional responsibility of the Congress. And I think when it comes to the financial services bill and the 358 regulatory filings required under that bill, that it's going to require a significant amount of oversight. So that not only will the Congress understand, but the American people understand just what this bill will do to our financial services industry. Thank you all very much.
That's the man expected to be Speaker of the House, John Boehner, currently the minority leader. When Congress reconvenes, he will be elected to replace Nancy Pelosi. Her era as Speaker will come to an end. He was there along with Haley Barbour, the chair of the Republican Governors Association, and Mitch McConnell, the minority leader in the Senate, but leader of a bigger minority. And you heard John Boehner suggesting there that Democrats may want to get on board this voter wave, or they may find themselves losing even more seats in the next election. We'll see if that comes true 2 years from now.
A Fox News alert, we just heard from the new leadership.
Joining us for a fair and balanced debate, Bernard Whitman, former pollster to President Bill Clinton, Also with us, Ford O'Connell, chairman of Civic Forum PAC and former director for rural outreach for Senator McCain's presidential campaign. Mr. O'Connell, we heard that this was a Republican wave year. Obviously, you did well in the House, but not the Senate. What's the difference, do you think?
I think minus some redistricting gains, we left a lot on the table. We weren't the victors. We were the beneficiaries of mainstream's anger.
Mainstream anger, and do you think that anger is going to go away in the next 2 years?
Absolutely not. I think people are wrong to call this a wave. I think it's a storm or a tempest. With a storm or a tempest, it either dissipates or it keeps going. And frankly, if we don't reinstill confidence in Main Street, it's going to bounce back and all incumbents will be on the chopping block in 2012, regardless of party.
We have to get Janice Dean in here. Tempest, wave, we got a lot of different analogies floating around. Ford? All right, Bernard, here's a question for you. We heard, obviously, from John Boehner today talking about his conversation with the president. You heard from Senator Mitch McConnell, still the minority leader there in the Senate, saying this, though. He said the group that should get the message is our friends on the other side. We keep on talking about this magical place called the center, where we're all going to meet and get along. Bernard, where exactly is the center, and how do both sides get there?
Well, I think the real loser in yesterday's election are the American people, and that's not because the Democrats lost. It's because the political center is now dead. And we are a centrist nation. The vast majority of Americans are moderates. But look what happened. The Blue Dog Democrats, those centrist Democrats, completely wiped out. The Republican Party has been taken over by the far-right Tea Party. And so what do we have left? We have a president who the vast majority of people in this country feel, right or wrong, is too liberal. We're going to be left when Congress opens in January with fewer and fewer Democratic moderates and more very liberal Democrats. Same on the Republican side. There's very few moderates left in the Republican Party.
But Bernard, you say that the Republican Party is being taken over by the Tea Party. A few elections did go to some senators that were Tea Party backed. But if you saw Senator Jim DeMint's op-ed piece in the Wall Street Journal today, it doesn't necessarily seem that the Republican Party is expected to be taken over by the Tea Party. You think that's a fair statement?
I don't think the Republican Party is going to be taken over by the Tea Party. The Tea Party is really our national consciousness when it comes to fiscal issues. They will tell us. Frankly, the bottom line is if we don't restore confidence in Main Street, we're not going to go anywhere and everybody's going to be out. I really have to stand by that.
Bernard, real quickly, what about the consideration, though, that President Obama has essentially lost control of the Democratic Party? I mean, are they going to be standing with him in the same way they did the last 2 years? Those legislators who were left?
I think that the president's going to have a very tough challenge. And I tell you who I think the real winner is in last night's election is these nascent independent third-party movements. And I think one or two of them are going to bubble up and very well may recapture the political center in this country. I think that's really where the energy is going forward.
Let's talk a little bit about just satisfaction overall. Ford, you touched on this a little bit, and we're going to be hearing from the president in just an hour. We're going to hear from him. What do you think he has to say, not to either party, but to the American people, Ford?
We really have to come together. We have to stop partisan bickering. We have to restore confidence in the economy. We have to really pay attention to the needs of Americans who are living month to month and day to day. That is what we have to pay attention to. Look at Middle America. It went red. Middle America went red because we're not paying attention to the economy, which is their needs.
Bernard, your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that, one of the things we haven't talked about is what's going on with the states. And my concern, frankly, in terms of where we're going forward, is the Republicans captured so many state legislatures, so many governorships. They're going to be in charge of redistricting, and the potential for gerrymandering for 212 is enormous, which is going to further infuriate the independents who are, in fact, the plurality in this country. And I think that going forward, it really rests with these independent movements to rise up and really reclaim the political center in this country. I have great concerns that the Republicans are not going to be able to do it, and I'm frankly not sure whether the president's going to be able to do so as well.
We're going to wrap it up there. Bernard Whitman was pollster for President Bill Clinton. Ford O'Connell was with the McCain campaign. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, all new on Happening Now. We're talking a lot about politics today, obviously, for good reason. The Republicans, also the Tea Party, gaining some ground coast to coast. We have live team coverage now, post-election. We've got Anita Vogel in Nevada, Phil Keating in Florida, and Molly Line in Ohio. But first, out to Las Vegas. Majority Leader Harry Reid holding back the tide there, keeping his seat in the Senate. Anita?
That's right, Jenna. Senator Harry Reid fending off a Tea Party challenge, the biggest challenge of his political career, as Nevada voters decide to send him back to Washington. Jenna?
Now to Miami, voters handing the Tea Party a victory there as well. Phil Keating's watching this for us. Phil?
Yeah, that would be Republican Marco Rubio, but in one of the closest races for governor in the state's history, well, it is now over even before the votes are all completely counted. Coming up, I'll explain why the Democrat just conceded.
Yeah, we'll be interested to hear more about that. Now to Columbus, Ohio. Swing voters in the Buckeye State showing Democrats the door. Molly?
That's right. There were massive GOP gains here in the Buckeye State. The governor, John Kasich, the Republican, winning last night, and a number of other GOP wins as well. The impact on 2012 and what it could mean for redistricting coming up. Jenna?
It's nice just to get a taste of what's to come, you guys. Thank you so much. A full report from Molly, Phil, and Anita coming up this hour.
First, though, let's get to the White House. President Obama woke up this morning to a new landscape on Capitol Hill. We are about to hear from the president for the first time since Republicans took control of the House. Our White House correspondent, Mike Emanuel, is live for us on the North Lawn right now. In terms of tone, the president's going to be speaking in about an hour, Mike. What should we expect?
Well, John, expect the president to essentially reach across the aisle to try to say with congressional Republicans, okay, congratulations on your victory last night. I look forward to working with the future Speaker Boehner. Let's find common ground. Let's get things done. We were sent to Washington essentially to get things done. And so with this election, there is a mandate to get some things done. So obviously both sides don't agree on a number of issues, but the effort will be made to try to find common ground to see if there's some compromise that can be found or struck in order to move things forward for the country, John.
We will also presumably hear his reaction to some of his big disappointments from the election yesterday. Talk about some of those.
Well, no question about that, John. The president visited the state of Ohio 12 times, including last Sunday with the vice president, and both the Ohio governor's race with an incumbent Democrat and the Ohio Senate race went Republican. And so obviously that is a bitter disappointment for this White House. Obviously the president's former Senate seat that Alexi Giannoulias was running for in Illinois, he lost to Mark Kirk. That would be another setback. And the president spent a fair amount of time in the swing state of Pennsylvania working for Joe Sestak over Pat Toomey. Well, Toomey won, and so in a lot of these critical swing states, the outcome was not favorable to this White House. And obviously with the Florida race, with the governor just with the Republican winning there, obviously there's concern for the White House. Another swing state where there will be Republicans in charge, John.
Going to be fascinating to see what the president has to say. Mike Emanuel, thank you.
Thank you.
Do not go anywhere after Happening Now. The president will be holding a news conference 1 p.m. Eastern Time. That's less than an hour from now at the White House. You will hear what he has to say about the results of yesterday's elections.
Well, from Washington, D.C., let's go down to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where we're hearing now from the new governor of Florida, Rick Scott. Let's listen in.
A message loud and clear. They said, let's get to work. This morning I received a gracious call from Alex Sink. She ran quite a race.
Oh, really?
And I appreciate her congratulations. Campaigns require us to focus on our differences, but making good things happen requires focusing on our common goals. Today the campaign's over. And Jennifer and I are eager to start bringing people together to solve our state's problems. I want to take just a minute to thank the thousands and thousands of people across this state who made this victory possible.
That's It's Rick Scott, the Republican, the new governor-elect of Florida. As you just mentioned, Alex Sink, the Democrat, in a very tight, tough race, conceded victory to him, and he will be the new and next governor of Florida. John?
For Democrats, one of the few bright spots last night came in Nevada. Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid defeating his Tea Party-backed challenger, Republican Sharon Angle, in one of the most hotly contested races in the country. Anita Vogel is live in Las Vegas with a look at it. Anita, was Harry Reid's victory last night a big surprise to him?
Well, I think it was a bit of a surprise for most folks. You know, Harry Reid was down in the polls over the past couple of weeks here, but you could really see, though, that he was picking up momentum on the campaign trail in the last week. And the very same get out the vote effort that was put into place here in Nevada to help get Barack Obama elected was kicked into overdrive for Harry Reid. Now, last night he told his supporters he is ready to go back to Washington to help fix Nevada's economy.
This race has been called, but the fight is far from over. The bell that just rang isn't the end of the fight, it's the start of the next round.
And Reid added he believes the message voters sent Washington last night was that they want Republicans, Democrats, and independents to work together to find common ground. John.
Anita Vogel live in Las Vegas. Anita, thank you.
Well, John, we got another Fox News alert. The Associated Press calling the Maine governor's race for Tea Party-backed Paul LePage. He narrowly defeated independent Elliott Cutler and 3 other candidates on the ballot, in fact. He's the former mayor of Waterville, Maine, and he's the first Republican elected governor in that state in 20 years.
Some of our viewers have been asking about that on our America's Town Hall. Paul LePage wins that race. He is widely seen as the kingmaker of the Tea Party. Senator Jim DeMint gaining a lot of leverage on Capitol Hill as he welcomes a new class of conservatives to Washington. But he has some interesting advice for them. He's joining us live. Also, the Dow down about 34 points right now. Not much happening on this day after the election. Wither Wall Street as a result of this Republican wave. We'll get into that.
Well, our next guest is a Tea Party favorite, and now some are calling him a kingmaker. South Carolina Senator Jim DeMint riding to an easy win in the polls in his home state with no real opposition there. DeMint was able to spend millions of dollars to help these Republicans that are backed by the Tea Party. All on your screen are victorious. But the Tea Party, of course, also failed in several other big high-profile races, some in Delaware, also Nevada. So we'll talk a little bit more about this with Senator Jim DeMint. He's joining us now from Greenville, South Carolina. So, Senator, now the question isn't if the Tea Party-backed candidates go to Washington, but how? How are they going to change things? Is there a working strategy on your part to do it?
Well, I think people are going to find that these Tea Party-backed candidates are actually right in the middle of where America really is. There's nothing radical about balancing your checkbook, and these candidates have run on simple ideas like banning parochial pork barrel earmarks and balancing our budget, repealing Obamacare. These are not far-right ideas. These are right in the middle of where America is. And I think it's right where a lot of Republicans are and probably where a lot of Democrats would like to be. We've found, if you look at the Tea Party movement, that 40% of the people who call themselves Tea Partiers are Democrats and independents. So there's a big tent out there, and my hope is the Republicans will continue to embrace that energy and add some organization to it. And the key thing is just do what we promised in this campaign.
Okay, let's pick up on what you promised as well. And you mentioned balancing the checkbook, the economy, jobs, a major issue here. And we have new faces and new candidates being sent to Washington to help solve those problems. So what new ideas are these Tea Party-backed candidates and yourself bringing to the table when we resume Congress and try to get people back to work?
Well, the main idea is really an old idea, and that's constitutional limited government. A lot of Americans, not just Tea Party members, are just outraged at the growth of spending and debt and government takeovers. And we, as new Republicans now in the Congress, need to demonstrate that we believe in a limited government. And probably the first step of demonstrating that is to ban parochial self-serving earmarks. That is hurting the Republican Party and our country as much as anything, because it keeps our focus on paving a local parking lot rather than dealing with our tax code and fixing Social Security. So that's something I hope we'll do as soon as we get back. But the next key thing is keeping our current tax rates the same so we can create jobs in our country, and hopefully repealing Obamacare so we don't bankrupt our country.
So you're mentioning a couple different things that are going to take a lot of coordination and compromise. And I want to bring up the Wall Street Journal op-ed piece that you wrote today, because you finished with a very significant line, if we can share this with our viewers. You say Tea Party Republicans were elected to go to Washington and save the country, not be co-opted by the club. So put on your boxing gloves. The fight begins today. That's what you're saying to these Tea Party-backed candidates as it relates to the club. You're talking about the Republican Party. Now, you're a marketing exec in a previous life. You pick your words very carefully. So why did you decide to choose this, the fight of putting on boxing gloves? Do we really need to worry about gridlock here in government?
Well, it's going to take a lot of courage to turn the government away from the edge of a cliff, and we really are. I mean, we're nearly at $14 trillion of debt right now, and we're planning to triple that in the next 10 years. Our country can't sustain this even for the next few years. So we need some folks who are willing to take on the establishment, and I'm not just talking about Republican establishment. It's the whole Washington bureaucratic establishment, the inertia of continuing to grow the government and add to the debt. Every week
Senator,
in Washington.
I apologize for interrupting, but that's what you talked about a lot during the campaign with some of these Tea Party-backed candidates. So that's what you've said, but how are you going to do it when you put out an op-ed piece like this that talks about boxing gloves and fighting?
Well, because it's going to be a tussle, and I think that's what these candidates had to do in their races to get elected, and they're coming to Washington for a purpose. They're not just coming to get a committee assignment and hopefully a title someday. They're really coming to help save our country, and there's going to be a lot of resistance to that. We've got to fight that, and I think that's what Americans expect us to do.
You know, Senator Mitch McConnell was just speaking, the minority leader in the Senate, of course. I know you're familiar with him. He said if one side should get a message from this election, it should be the other side. Talk to Mitch McConnell, not the Democrats. What suggestions do you have to Republicans coming back to the Senate and how they can work with this new group of candidates and obviously politicians now?
Well, I think these new Republicans who are coming in the Senate will give Mitch McConnell a lot more horsepower to do what he knows we need to do as Republicans. He's a good leader for our party. We've got a good leadership team. But we need Republicans who are going to actually stand with them when we take on these big government programs that the Democrats have pushed forward. So I think you're going to see the Republican Party united around the core principles of limited government, less spending, less taxes. That's what Americans are asking us to do. And I think by doing it, we're going to embrace what we see not only in the Tea Party movement, but this whole awakening that's going on across the country right now.
Senator, I only have about 30 seconds here, but your quick thoughts on this. What do you think the American public needs to hear from the president today?
I think we need to hear that the president will work with us, not to compromise on how much more debt to create, but to compromise on how much debt we're going to eliminate, how much spending we're going to eliminate. He needs to move to the other side of the ledger, stop growing government, and work with the American people on how do we turn ourselves away from a cliff.
Senator DeMint, I know it was a late night for you. We appreciate you joining us this morning and look forward to talking to you again, sir. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
A fresh face on the political scene sweeps to victory in Florida. Marco Rubio, a rising star in the Republican Party, as this Tea Party favorite pulls off a major victory. Marco Rubio goes to the U.S. Senate, defeating a former governor and a former member of Congress.
D.C. and Maryland. As more information comes through, of course, I'll bring it to you. But a big development in this investigation, John.
Yeah, please stay on it for us, Harris. Thanks.
Sure.
Well, just minutes ago, you heard Florida Governor-elect Rick Scott give part of his victory speech. It came after Democrat Alex Sink conceded that race. In the meantime, this formerly a long-shot candidate, a Tea Party favorite, is now bound for Washington as the state's next senator. Phil Keating is live in Miami with all these developments. So first of all, Phil, Florida now has this governor-elect who has never held office before. What comes with that?
Well, certainly Rick Scott's got a lot of quick studying to do, but throughout this campaign, he really hired on board his team, a lot of seasoned political advisors, and of course his running mate, the Lieutenant Governor-elect Jennifer Carroll. She is a state lawmaker already, so she certainly has experience in Tallahassee. Florida's unemployment rate is above 12%. That's been the issue in this campaign. And just moments ago, Scott claiming victory in Fort Lauderdale, saying he promises now is the time he will get Floridians to work.
This morning I received a gracious call from Alex Sink. She ran quite a race.
Oh, really?
And I appreciate her congratulations. Campaigns require us to focus on our differences, but making good things happen requires focusing on our common goals.
Now, the day began with just 53,000 votes separating Sink and Alex Sink, the Democratic candidate, and the Republican Scott. But based on doing all of the math, that is why at 10:30 this morning, the Democrat Alex Sink decided, even though this could have possibly gone towards an automatic recount, she conceded the race.
Lots of interesting points of that story to look forward to next time, Phil. Thank you so much. Phil Keating in Florida today.
All right, so Republicans have won a majority in the House of Representatives. Democrats still control the White House and the Senate. Take a look at how things are shaping up on Capitol Hill, where Republicans, well, some of the Senate races are yet to be decided, so we don't exactly know where the Senate is going to end up. We do know the numbers in the House, and Republicans are well over the margin that they need to control that body. Bill Kristol is editor of the Weekly Standard and a Fox News political analyst. So I don't imagine your phone has been ringing from the White House asking for advice on the president's demeanor today. But what should he say? How should he act in this news conference that's coming up in just about half an hour?
The first thing he should say is congratulations to the new incoming Speaker, John Boehner, to the Republican Party. He shouldn't minimize the fact that there's been something of a repudiation of his policies. And then I think he should say, let's work together right away to pass the tax cut, to extend the current tax rates. He can say, I myself preferred to raise taxes on the wealthy, but you know what? The Republicans have won a big victory here. Let's provide stability and certainty for investors and for working people. Let's just extend these tax rates for 2 years, and let's do it now in the lame duck session. I think from his point of view, it's going to happen anyway. The Republicans are going to insist on a 2-year extension, and they're going to win that. A lot of moderate Democrats in the Senate are going to go along with that. He can make it difficult, or he can make it easy. Why not be gracious and bipartisan in his first statement after
You think
the
the handwriting is on the wall that the Bush tax cuts get extended?
I really do, yeah, for 2 years, I think.
Even though the president has adamantly said that's a bad idea, in his view.
He said that, but after this, 60-plus seat pickup in the House, the first thing, if they don't do it in lame duck, the House Republicans will pass it on the first day in session in January. I believe the votes will be there in the Senate with conservative Democrats like Manchin from West Virginia to vote for it, Lieberman, Nelson. Is he going to veto a 2-year extension of current tax rates as his first act when there's just been a huge Republican victory by the public and where every business in the country is saying, remember, the old tax rates kick in on January 1st. Taxes will be going up for everyone. And everyone's saying, hey, wait a second, my taxes are going up. I think he needs to accept the 2-year extension.
How much of this election, I mean, we saw the Republican wave in the House. How much of this election was about Nancy Pelosi, and what happens to her now?
I think it was about the whole Democratic agenda, Democratic president and Democratic Congress. I think she will step down as leader of the Democratic Party. She may resign from the House. Newt Gingrich did in 1998, and Dennis Hastert did in 2006, 2007. So it might happen. She might step down. I think there might be a battle to succeed her as leader of the Democratic Party. Steny Hoyer would expect to get that, but he might be challenged from the left in the Democratic caucus.
Bill Kristol from the Weekly Standard. Bill, thanks.
Thanks, John.
Well, today, Town Hall it's America's Asking, our live chat up and running, taking any questions about this election and what's ahead for this nation. Harris is watching the buzz today. So, Harris, any action?
Well, I tell you, when you were talking to Jim DeMint, the chat room just blew up, and they are focused on whether or not the Tea Party should become its own third party. Jan Porterfield writes, Tea Party needs to continue being the watchdog of American politics. Get in on the conversation. Go to foxnews.com, click on John and Jenna's picture at the very top page. You'll see some red writing by it. You can email, blog once you get to the Happening Now page, or go straight to the live chat. Would love to include you. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Tonight, America Decided.
Well, a short while ago, we heard from Republican leaders talking about ways to cut government spending and get the economy back on track. We've been talking a whole lot about that. Now that Republicans have gained more control, what can we expect for the economy? How do we get people back to work? Dan Greenhouse is chief economic strategist for the trading firm Miller Tabak. He has some thoughts on this. First of all, Dan, any reaction in the market? I mean, we have a lot of us have money in the market as far as our 401ks. Is there any reaction with this change in dynamic in D.C.?
Well, given how the elections turned out, they were pretty much in line with what us in the markets were expecting. And so there hasn't really been a noticeable reaction one way or the other. Had the Republicans taken control of the Senate, there might have been a larger reaction one way or the other. But to the extent that they did not, the markets are relatively flat.
We're not getting a whole lot of specifics about how we're going to get the economy back on track. We know the Federal Reserve is out with a decision today. Maybe some stimulus there. Will that help get people back to work?
Well, without getting too complicated, it's very difficult to envision what the Fed is going to do at 2:15 today having a meaningful impact on the unemployment rate. Part of the problems with the economy, types of things that we've spoken about in the past, are what's called structural in nature, and it's very difficult to envision that modestly lower interest rates, which is what's going to happen following the Fed's announcement, has a meaningful impact on the economy.
Well, we have new faces, new candidates in government. They can bring in some change, maybe structurally. Where would they have to start to kind of jumpstart what we're seeing is a slow recovery?
Yeah, there's a lot more room for the Republicans and certainly the newly elected congressional Republicans to cut government spending. To the extent whether that stimulates the economy in the short term or not is a separate question.
But where? Where do they start? They talk about cutting spending, and it's there's so much.
The problem with what congressional Republicans, the problem that is in front of them is massive in size. Federal outlays was about $3.5 trillion in 2010.
And is that just spending, federal outlays?
Just spending was about $3.5 trillion. It's hard to envision a scenario where you can make a meaningful dent in that by committing to cut about $100 billion, which is what the Pledge to America did. In order to really tackle both the near-term deficit and the medium-term deficit, you have to look at entitlement spending and the Defense Department. There is no two ways about it.
And you're not running for office, so you can say that, but the politicians have a tougher time.
Not yet.
Not yet. Dan, maybe breaking some news here. Dan Greenhouse from Miller Tabak. Thanks, Dan. John, over to you.
Jenna, lots of questions coming into the newsroom from our viewers. Let's bring in our town hall panel today. Kirsten Powers is a columnist for the New York Post and a Fox News contributor. Chris Stirewalt, a face you know, Fox News digital politics editor. Ron Bonjean served as communications director to former House Speaker Denny Hastert, also senior advisor to former Senate Majority Leader Trent Lott. John Ward is the senior House reporter for the Daily Caller. Welcome. Let's get right to our questions. Ron, here's an interesting one from Eric Johnson about the whole process as it happens now. Eric wants to know, many of the new elected representatives and senators have little or no experience in national government. How do they learn the ropes? From experienced legislators, from aides, or workshops?
Right. Now, that's a really great question. What they have is what's called freshman orientation, and that'll take place during the lame duck session, which begins, I believe, November 15th. They're going to come to Washington, and they're going to, just like being a freshman in high school, they're going to be a freshman in Congress. They're going to learn the hallways. They're going to learn where the bathroom is, frankly. They're going to learn how to vote. They're going to learn everything. And it's going to take some time for them to absorb all that.
But also, John, there was a story recently about how the Republicans were getting together and they were putting together basically key staff that they think would be good to help these new members. And I thought it was interesting because so many of the Tea Party people, I think, are really rejecting Washington, and I don't think they probably want old Washington hands working for them. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there, if they really sort of chart the course alone, or if they use sort of these people who have really become sort of part of the permanent Washington establishment.
Chris, here's a question for you, also from someone named Chris. and this is a question that actually comes into us quite a bit. With the GOP now in control in the House, will they try to repeal health care?
Able to achieve that because obviously President Obama would veto any effort to repeal that. The question for the Republicans is, can they do stuff to basically defund or make it impossible to execute the full extent of this healthcare law? So that's where you talk about not funding the money for the IRS agents who do the reporting and collecting to make sure that everybody's abiding by the new law that says you have to buy health insurance. Those are things that deal with creating new funding streams for the Department of Health and Human Services. The point is, Republicans can't repeal it, but they can slow it down enough to take a shot at repeal if they do well in 2012.
John Ward, a question for you. Is there any way to know, Bob wants to know from Clearwater, Florida, how many votes were cast for none of the above?
I think that we will know when all the ballots are cast. We're talking about Nevada, I believe.
Well, yeah, that's one of the races where you had that option.
Right. Yeah, I think it will differ from state to state, but I think I'm not an expert on Nevada law, but I assume that we will know how many ballots were cast for that.
What about this, Kirsten? Ralph Wood wants to know, is it too early to ask for a balanced budget by 2014? Could it happen with all of the fiscal conservatives headed to Washington?
That's a hard one to imagine happening, but I think that we'll see if they really are what they say they are, because we can remember the last time Republicans were in charge and they said they were fiscal conservatives, that we saw the greatest expansion of government in, probably our history. So I think we have to wait and see whether or not they're really going to be able to do that. And they've talked a lot about it, but when you ask for specifics on what they're going to cut, it's very fuzzy. And so it's nice to talk in these generalities, but we're going to have to see them come up with some actual real cuts that aren't going to alienate a lot of Americans.
Ron, Charles Hodges in Tallahassee says he's concerned about border security, and he wants to know, can the Republican-led House send troops to the border, or is that only done by the president?
Well, they can pass a bill authorizing funding to send troops to the border. The president would have to make that call and have to get its way through the Senate into the president's desk. That's going to be a point of debate in the next Congress, is border security and immigration. Absolutely.
We've got so many questions today, we have to bring in 4 panelists to answer them all. Stick with us. Jenna?
And we had some questions about our production side of it, John, on the board. Everyone wanted to know, why isn't everyone just in one room? Why are they all in little boxes? We want to give them their own cameras so they can talk directly to you. That's why we're doing that. In the meantime, we have a lot of great questions coming up, including will the Tea Party become a third party in 2012? And also, Valerie wants to know, will Obama reach across the aisle? That's a big question. We've got a big news conference coming up at 1 p.m. We'll get our panelists to answer that question just ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm Megyn Kelly. This could be the most significant moment in the president's administration. Mr. Obama responds to what is widely being characterized as an outright rejection of his administration's policies by voters across America. It happens at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Here to react, Monica Crowley, Joe Trippi, Doug Schoen, Ari Fleischer, and Bernie Goldberg, among others. See you in 15 minutes.
A Fox News alert. It had been undecided till now, but now the Associated Press is calling the Connecticut governor's race for the Democratic candidate Dan Malloy. He defeated Republican Tom Foley. Those results still unofficial, but Connecticut's Secretary of State says there is a wide enough margin of victory that a recount will not be triggered.
All right, back to our America's Asking Town Hall USA. Let's bring back our panel, including Kirsten Powers, Ron Bonjean, John Ward, and Chris Stirewalt. And Chris, starting off with this question, we've had a lot of questions about military votes and whether or not they've been counted and what's going to happen in that process moving forward. Both Leslie and William had questions about that. So what do we know about how military votes are counted in elections like this?
Well, we were watching a couple of races really closely on the decision desk last night for places where military ballots could have been the deciding factor. Because as we know, in places, especially Illinois, where they failed to get the ballots to military voters, this was a potential big headache. But Mark Kirk in Illinois carried it pretty handily over Democrat Alexei Giannoulias, so that wasn't the case. Now, we're still watching in House races across the country where we have 10 or 11 House races that are still undecided, where it's too close. And in those places, yeah, military voters could be consequential. And for secretaries of state and local election clerks that didn't comport to the law about when they had to get ballots to military voters, this could be a big headache.
It'll be interesting to watch. Again, a lot of questions about how that process is taking place. Ron, Mr. Wagner had this question, and he wants us to slow down. Ron, he says we need to talk about 2012. What's going to be so important is to watch what happens in 2011. Ron, what do you think we should watch over the next year?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. 2011 is going to set up 2012, and the first thing we're going to have to watch is what House Republicans do with their new majority. Are they going to pass the spending cuts? Are they going to work on tax relief? Are they going to do the things that last night's national referendum on federal spending said that they should do, is to cut the size of government? And I think, over the next 6 months a year, we're going to see how successful they are. But it's really going to be up to the Senate and President Obama whether or not they go along with that and how well they're going to be willing to work with them in a bipartisan way.
And bipartisanship is also another hot topic on our chat board. Kirsten, this one is coming from Jonathan. We're going to talk about the president in a moment. But Jonathan wanted to talk about Senator Reid. And he wanted to know what you think Reid should have learned from this whole campaign process and how he should reintroduce himself to the Senate. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think, Reid should actually be humbled. I saw there were some remarks that came out earlier today that would suggest that he's not really that humbled. And, he was in the race of a lifetime by what I think really was a kind of underwhelming candidate. And so it says a lot about how unhappy people are with him in his state. And I think that, he does need to recalibrate in the same way the president needs to recalibrate. And I think they need to recalibrate on the House side.
Kirsten, do you think they're all on the same page? Do you think they've held a conference call or they've talked about a game plan moving forward just to make sure that they're echoing each other?
No, I don't know that they have, and I wouldn't be surprised if they haven't, frankly. I think that this is a very fluid situation, and it will be interesting to see what happens at the president's press conference to see if there's been any evolution in the way they were thinking last night, which I think was not humbled, not really feeling that this is a rebuke of the president. And so I think based on what I've seen from Pelosi and Reid, they're they seem to be saying the same thing.
And it's interesting to watch. And John, that leads us. One of our viewers wants to know, John, Valerie, will Obama reach across the aisle? Will he actually do that genuinely? What do you think?
I think he will reach across the aisle rhetorically, and I think there will be some, ways in which he says he wants to work with Republicans. But look, Republicans, Tom Coburn, the senator from Oklahoma, told me today he's willing to block raising the federal debt limit if Obama doesn't make cuts in the hundreds of billions of dollars when that issue comes to the fore in a couple of months. And I don't think that President Obama is going to be willing to reach across the aisle to that extent. So there's going to be some serious confrontation there, and we'll see where it goes.
Different levels of compromise, different things coming ahead. Kirsten, right. Ron, and John, and Chris, thank you so much for being our panelists today.
Thanks a lot.
Our viewers appreciate it very much.
And a Fox News alert. You can see they are gathered there in the East Room at the White House, just moments away now from President Obama's news conference. He is expected to address the Republicans taking control of the House of Representatives. Those remarks from the president live coming up at the top of the hour. Well, he's a familiar face, been with us day after day throughout this campaign season with his daily power play.
Forever and ever. He was on set last night at our Election Decision Center, a very important place, and he even stayed in New York a little longer just to kind of review the elections with us, and he has a new baby at home, so he's busy. Chris Stirewalt, Fox News digital politics editor.
Forever and ever. It just feels like it's been a second, you guys. It's just gone by in a blink.
What do you think about just the results overall, what you saw last night?
Well, we were predictive. We knew what was going to happen in large part. There were still some individual surprises.
Like what?
Well, the margin of victory for Harry Reid in Nevada, that was not anything anybody really saw coming.
And what was that margin of victory?
Oh, it was almost 10 points. It was a big, big win. And it's clear is that unions made him a top priority, and they rolled the buses, and they got their voters to the polls. They turned on the turnout machine, and it worked.
And in terms of the Alaska Senate race, we still don't know. We know that the write-in candidate is ahead, but there were, 160 write-in candidates?
Well, we know this. The next senator from Alaska will not be a Democrat because at least the write-in, all the write-ins, that would be Lisa Murkowski or it'd be Joe Miller, but it's not going to be Democrat Scott McAdams. So the Republicans are pretty confident that they can count on that seat.
You know, the question the day after for some of the people that lost, Meg Whitman, Carly Fiorina, we're looking at some big names, Linda McMahon, and just, I don't mean to me naming the women GOP candidates, but there's some of the more high-profile ones in this season. What happens to them? Do you think they stay in politics? Do you think they go back to their professional careers? Where do they go?
I think they probably want to know why it costs so much to lose.
Oh, yeah.
That's there's that, and for some of them, they're going to love it and they're going to want to come back and they're going to want to fight. I think for others, you just say $141 million for a losing effort is just too much.
So you don't think Meg Whitman will be back?
I would be surprised if we saw her too soon.
Interesting.
Interesting. Yep. That's the word.
Chris, you're the man. You're the decision desk man. It's good to have
I love being with you guys up here. This is just a lot of fun.
Well,
been an interesting campaign season, Chris. Good to have you
here.
Right now, we are awaiting President Obama's first public remarks since Americans went to the polls, and there's been a whole lot of speculation about what tone the president will strike after what some are calling a big defeat for the Democrats, specifically in the House. We're going to find out when he steps to the podium just moments from now, and you can watch that live right here on Fox News with Megyn Kelly.
We're all going to be watching the president coming up.
Big news ahead. Thanks for joining us, everybody.
America Live starts right now.
Thanks, guys. This is a Fox News alert. Less than 24 hours after stunning midterm gains for the GOP, President Obama is set to hold a news conference on last night's election results and the new balance of power in our nation's capital. Welcome to America Live on the day after Election Day. I'm Megyn Kelly. There's a live look there at the White House where we are now moments away from President Obama's remarks. We are within 3 minutes of the start time, which we are told is very specific. The commander-in-chief and his party dealt a serious blow last night, losing several key Senate, House, and governor's races. A handful of races still undecided or uncalled. As we await the president, joining me now, Bret Baier, anchor of Special Report and my co-host from last night. Bret, it was a pleasure last night. Thanks so much for being back with me this morning or this afternoon.
An honor. The early train works well.
Yeah, we're both bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and looking forward to hear what the president says. Frame it up for us. What must he do here?
Sure. Well, I'll let David Axelrod, the senior advisor, giving a quote to the New York Times saying the president will read the results carefully and hear the messages of the American people that they're sending. He'll do that with care and humility. There will be a lot of people listening on both sides of the aisle to how the president frames this. What's the tone he takes? What specifics does he talk about? Does he talk about what he will compromise on and what he won't compromise on? And most importantly, perhaps, the